play ball.
Parking space.
November 17th, 2022 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order. I want to start off by saying that tonight, if you wish to speak, you need to get a blue card by the door on the table back there along with the agenda, and fill that out and give it to Mr. Shipley, and he will call on individuals as the items come up on the agenda. If you are speaking on one of the items on the agenda, he will call your name at that point. He'll call 2 or 3 names at a time, and if one person's speaking, will the other people get at the back of the room there and be ready to go when that person's through? We have quite a bit on the agenda tonight that we need to get through. And also, on the back of that agenda, there's the public comment protocol. Please look over that. Tonight, we ask that everybody hold their remarks to 5 minutes. We have a lot to get through tonight. A lot of people may want to speak, and we ask that you hold your comments to 5 minutes. And please, I say this every month, please avoid redundancy. Don't say the same thing that the person before you said. Please come up with some other comments that have your feelings on the item on the agenda. What I'll do at the end of somebody talking, I will ask for just a raise of hands for people who agree with that. And so if you can't get up, just let us know how you feel. That's your way of letting us know how you feel if you don't want to speak. So we're going to move on to item number 1, which is the approval of the agenda.
Any changes?
No changes.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
You got that, Mark? Okay. Approval of the minutes for the October 20th, 2022 meeting. Do we have any changes, updates that need to be made?
Abstain.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Abstain.
Item number 3, discussion and public hearing on a request to amend the future land use map in the Comprehensive Land Use Plan Update 2012 for 11500 Kingston Pike. 68.31 acres with mixed-use town center, medium-density residential, low-density residential, and open space to commercial, parks and recreation, low-density residential, and very low-density residential. John Beam, Hy-Vee applicant.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I was just informed that the applicant would like to request a postponement on items 3 and 4.
Okay.
Now, that is something they'll need to speak to, and you all will have to assess whether you want to entertain that or not. But apparently, they would like to do that. I just found that out. So.
Okay. The applicant.
Yeah, we need a reason.
Yeah,
Yeah,
here's a reason.
reason.
Yeah, we need a reason
We
here.
need a justification.
Good evening, Phil Hoy, Hy-Vee, 24479 Elthon, Swan, Iowa. We still would like to present, in fact. We still have some information we'd like to share with this board. So you don't want to not have this item heard. We certainly want to talk through it, and then we want to explain to you why we'd want to postpone it. And of course, it's your decision if you want to postpone it or not, based on what we share with you. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Ben, to go through the presentation, please.
Thank you. Ben Mullins, law firm Francis McCall and Seymour, 550 West Main Street. I represent the applicant Hy-Vee. Mr. Hoy, you spoke to him, and John Brim with Hy-Vee are here, as well as Alan Grissom and Wesley Stokes with Cannon and Cannon. We have been working through this request for quite some time, and what we are asking to do right now is, they flew down from Iowa, obviously, today to present this request, and we can talk about some of the issues that have been raised and how we can address them through our application. But We, as part of the comments that we've received and the feedback that we've received, we were looking to try to partner with a local developer to, work on the concepts for other parts of this property, not just the Hy-Vee that we're looking to put on the property, but, how we can make some of these other concepts, especially the residential, work. And we are really close to working out something with a local developer to try to come up with maybe a way to change the concept that would include reconfiguring the way we want to put this store on there, how that would work with the parks and open space that we want to do, how that would integrate with the residential. So that's the reason why we are asking not to vote on this tonight. We can go through the concept plan that we have. We've got, Cannon and Cannon here. They can talk about, the traffic impacts. Cannon and Cannon is our traffic impact engineer. They've done the traffic impact analysis. But, they're also working with the city just overall on some of the traffic issues that are in this area. So it kind of works very, very much hand in hand with regard to that. We do have a slideshow that we sent in, and I can go through this, but my comments were, I prepared to present a full application today to ask for this to go through. But we can talk about where we are with the concept, and and I understand there's still concerns, which is why we would like a chance to go back and try to address those concerns more. So if you could go to slide number 3.
Basic question.
Sure.
Before you go too much further.
Yeah.
If you're changing the game plan right now on the fly, what's the purpose in going through anything that's basically going to be outdated with
Well,
whatever you're going to come back with?
I understand
We don't
that.
need to take our time doing
Well, I mean, if
doing
if you are willing to entertain a postponement on that, then we can talk about that. Phil,
Well, either we'll think maybe about a postponement, other comments from the other people, but postponement or withdrawal and resubmittal. I don't know which one's more.
What we'd like to talk about is specifically, we'd like to address some of the items that we've heard that we know we can address. We want to talk about traffic and those issues and check the box of traffic. We want to talk about its orientation with the neighborhood and sort of check that box with you. We want to talk about some of the changes that we've made on this new concept plan to some of the commercial areas up along Kingston Pike and that orientation. So we'd like to talk to you about some of those modifications. What we don't have completely worked out yet is some of that residential component to the back. So that would be the reason for some of the postponement, and then hopefully to take some of your comments back this evening. And I guess what I want you to hear is that there are probably many that want us to go away, but we would like to keep working with you on a concept that could work. And so that's why we'd like to present, we'd like to show you our new plan, we'd like to talk about some of the issues that we know exist on the site. At the end of the day, what we know is one of the biggest challenges is the town center zoning and its limitations on the size of the building. That is of paramount concern for the town center zoning, so we understand, acknowledge that. We can look at making the building smaller. We can look at making our box smaller, take 30 to 40,000 square feet out of that box, shrink it down, maybe look at orientation of that building. Some of those things we can do, and we want to get some of your feedback this evening. The only reason for a postponement would be is if you're willing to do that. If you are not willing, if you don't want to do that and go through that process and look at reorientation possibly, or if you're willing to accept a smaller box but not a 25,000 square foot or less box, then you can decide to vote. It's totally up to you if you want to vote or not. So we're not coming here saying we absolutely want a postponement. We definitely want to go through the information, and at the end of the day, we want you to hear that we want to work on something based on your feedback, and if you give us time to do that, then we'd like to come back to you. But if after what you've heard, you don't think there's a reason to do that, then please vote, and we
Well,
can
I don't think we're
move on.
certainly in a position to vote. That's my opinion, okay?
Well, I
Other
would ask
people,
this
but I would think you're more into the workshop mode than the
And we've
on
already
presenting
workshopped
information. If
My
you've got
question-
a new proposal, that's different.
this. Are you still going for commercial zoning, park zoning, R3 and R4, or whatever? That's what the zoning you're looking for? So-
Generally, yes. I mean, the zoning on the part beyond the park, that could be tweaked. but it's not going to be significant. It's still going to be low-density residential in those areas. The commercial piece, yes, we're still looking for that commercial zoning, and regardless of what we come back with, that'll be the case. So,
Well, my point would be this: we're not approving a plan tonight anyway. Even if you stick with this same plan, all we're approving or discussing is zoning, which as soon as you get the zoning, you can pretty much do whatever is permitted in that zoning, regardless if you've shown us a plan or not. That goes for any residential that goes in R3 or R1 or R2, or the zoning is, if you can meet the standards of the zoning. So I'm struggling to understand whether a new concept is really going to change the game for me.
Yeah, my concern was if you were coming up with a different concept, would you change any of the zoning areas? And back to your question, the same thing, yeah.
so if you go to slide number 4,
Which one is it? Oh,
this one slide after this slide.
that one.
So this is a different concept plan than the one that you saw last time, only in that the commercial area that is along Kingston Pike is more street front, it's more pedestrian friendly. So that is a change from the last concept plan that you've seen. This plan also has the same size store that everything else behind that is consistent with the last plan that you saw. So what we wanted to talk about this evening was that plan. We wanted to talk about our plan being consistent with the town center zoning. And then, like I said before, we wanted to offer that if, understanding that the biggest constraint is the large box, is there an interest in looking at a plan with a smaller box? And I'm not trying to work session this at all. At the end of the day, the commercial area is still going to be the commercial area. But what I wanted to impress upon this meeting is that the town center zoning, when it was put in place on this parcel, even according to the design guidelines, called for high-density residential in and around that zoning district. As I understand, that's not a use that's desired here or even allowed now. So the town center zoning district description doesn't even apply to this parcel, but yet the same requirements and standards are being applied to it. We believe that we can bring elements of the town center zoning to this design, whether it's with the commercial up along Kingston Pike or even how we design our building, again with its orientation. But at the end of the day, even within the standards of town center, it calls for high-density residential. One of the first meetings we had with the town was to talk about the fact that we don't need high-density residential for our concept to work. We can fit into the neighborhood. We can match up with the uses in the neighborhood, which is what the town center zoning calls for, consistent with surrounding uses. We can do that. And because we're an end user, we can de-densify the site. But what'll be a challenge for us is to say we can take this building, our main food store, make that building smaller. Like I said, 30,000 or more square feet out of that building. But we're still a ways from 25,000 square foot limitation. But this plan that we have is the least impactful plan that's been presented to the neighborhood. The current zoning allows for much more density than this plan shows for. We've created larger buffer spaces than have been shown on this parcel yet. And because, again, we're the end user, we can do that. We've got the right street connections with the neighboring streets that the staff has asked for, and as part of your long-term visioning for street connectivity. And when it comes to traffic, which I know is a major concern, when you compare our plan to previous plans, it is no more impactful than any other zoning uses that could be on here with the current zoning.
Well, I would say the current zoning is mostly R1, which is a lower residential density than even what they're showing here. So about 2/3 of the property is currently zoned R1. So only a the front part is commercial, then you have some office, a little bit of buffer, but then the rest of it, south 2/3 of it is currently zoned rural residential, which is less than 2 units per acre. And to me, the fundamental question for the community and you all is not necessarily this concept, and then this is just coming as a planner. It's whether you're okay with this kind of very different plan of development than what has been kind of the vision of not just this property, but also the larger area centered around the intersection of Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road, that we've been trying to incrementally create something that kind of visually and functionally differentiates itself from the rest of the town, like the intersection up here at Campbell Station and Kingston Pike with the three corners that have redeveloped to give you something kind of different and a little bit more active spaces that are a little bit more pedestrian scale. So that, again, and then the town center project where the old Kroger was is another example. And that mixed-use town center area that's been described historically in policy plans and then mapped in our update in 2012, has really historically extended from Glen Abbey to Concord Road, and it intentionally included several properties because to make it really an identifiable area that people kind of associate with being the core or the downtown of Farragut, it needs to be an area that's fairly substantial, not just one piece of property. And it is something that's not going to happen overnight, but it's something that over time, as properties develop, like this would be a completely new development, or redevelopment like we've seen at 35 North or Farragut Gateway, that you're starting to create something that people say, hey, that's a little bit different. It's kind of an active space. There's a lot going on there. This is more what's presented here, and it's nothing wrong with this development, but it's more of a traditional arterial commercial project that you could find anywhere outside of this part of the town. So I think the question is really a philosophical question before we kind of get in the weeds with different concept layouts as to whether philosophically the community really is okay with this kind of very different look and feel to this part of our town. Because if this happens and it gets rezoned, there's no guarantee that this will actually get built, because I always talk about that with rezonings. You can't pay attention to the concept or the traffic study necessarily. It's good to know, but things change, and you could get something that is, very different than this and could be really kind of something the community really, really wouldn't want. So that's something we need to think about as we look at both the map change, which affects zoning because it's in the mixed-use town center, and then what that change would mean to not only this property, but also other properties. What incentive would Village Green Shopping Center have to do something different as they age and want to redevelop to something that has a different look and feel? It's currently a big box, I get that, but if we're trying to incrementally create something different, we have to look at every property that is in this town center area, and you really pay close attention to it and listen to what the community has to say, because it's their plan, it's their vision. You all are just kind of initiators of that. But that to me is the biggest question about this whole matter, as opposed to really getting hung up on a concept and different things that they're showing with the concept. But it's up to you all, whatever you want to do, but that's the staff's position on it.
But on the issue of the concept plan, I understand this is just a concept plan, and there's concern that if this is rezoned, that this concept plan doesn't have to be the plan that's brought before you or the final plan. But wouldn't it be true, though, that if you saw the plan that was being presented as a final plan and you didn't like the direction of that plan, you could decide to change the zoning back or change the zoning to something else at that time? So just because you agreed to the zoning tonight, if for some reason we go away and another concept is brought before you, you have the choice to change the zoning back.
No, we don't.
Not necessarily. Usually it's applicant-driven.
Once
It's
once
landowner-driven.
Yeah, once it's developed, once it's rezoned, we're kind of, you have rights to that property as it's currently zoned.
You don't have
That's-
vested rights to it.
I have to say, that's my philosophy.
Well, it
People have
just-
rights to their
It's just a kind of
property as it's currently
a
zoned.
standing principle that we've had in the town for many years is we really haven't arbitrarily rezoned uncooperative landowners' properties, if that makes sense.
And
So
I understand.
it takes a landowner to initiate the process.
And you do have that authority, whether you choose to exercise it or not, it's a different question altogether. And I think what Mr. Hoy was trying to get at is that you also have the authority to impose conditions upon a rezoning at the time. That you can impose conditions relative to the amount of open space that we're intending to dedicate here, or the amount of right-of-way that we intend to dedicate here. I mean, a big portion of this rezoning is going to parks and open space, which is very limited as to what could be developed on that property in the future. So there, you do have the options and the authority to make sure whatever comes back before this board is something that's closer to this vision, because you'll have to approve, the site plans moving forward as well. So if all this is a public record, I mean, Hy-Vee has spent a lot of time engaging the community. We've been here several times. They fly down here every time. They're here tonight. We have listened. We have tried to adapt and change things based upon the input that we're receiving. We're still willing to do that. Hy-Vee wouldn't be investing this much time and effort if they aren't willing to do what they say they're going to do, and all this is a matter of public record. So I do think we have options available as a town to make sure, if this is the concept we're presenting, that you can make sure we move forward with something that isn't substantially different from this.
I'm just going to state that I agree with staff's position. And I did a lot of research pulling out the history of our moving towards adopting and wanting a mixed-use town center feel since February of '91. And the actions of the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen throughout the years have all been in this effort to establish a sense of place through this pedestrian-oriented, walkable feel, unique sense of place. And I think this idea abandons that. I do not feel comfortable. I know zoning is a little different than talking about the land use plan, but I do not feel comfortable adding any more commercial, rezoning office to commercial. It moves back behind what is now currently residential. And I've heard statements that, well, it's just 4 houses, but you don't live in one of those 4 houses. If I lived in one of those 4 houses, I would not want commercial coming in behind me. And again, I understand, Mr. Mullins, what you're saying, but it's been the position of this planning commission, from my understanding since its founding, that we respect the zoning as it's zoned. And that means something when we rezone it. It's because we believe that it's an appropriate thing to rezone. And it is, to me, it's not appropriate to rezone back behind residential. So I don't think that my mind is going to be changed if you delay this. So
My opinion is that you have presented this 2 items here. And these are not the plan. The items you have presented are future land use map changes and zoning changes. And that was the agenda that was the items that were presented in the agenda for us to vote upon. The fact that you may have massaged your plan is really not pertinent to the agenda item that you've asked us to vote on tonight. It's interesting, but as Marcus said, it's no guarantee that whatever you come up with is going to be the final plan. I would recommend to this board, to this commission, that you either withdraw this application or let us vote on this application as presented for the future land use change and for the zoning change. That I think are the 2 proper options. If you don't want to withdraw this application, then I think we ought to vote on it as presented. That's my,
That's what we're here tonight to do.
pardon me?
It's what we are here tonight to do.
Correct.
Does anybody else on the planning commission have any questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
Any other
Are we
comments?
gonna start?
Are you
so-
interested in
Yeah.
withdrawing your application?
Or are we gonna pursue this tonight?
I think that's the choice that you have.
You're staying with the same zoning request.
We
Then
are.
Then we need to
I
take
mean,
action tonight.
it's
on it.
possible that if we were to shrink the commercial area, make the food store smaller, that we could shrink the amount of commercial, lessen the impact on the residential. So in that sense, we would be back before you with a modified zoning request. And if that helps gain support, and we can come up with some additional design elements that hit on some of the additional desired items from a town center perspective, then we can work to do that as well, continue to do that as well.
I do have nine citizen comments on this item if you want to hear those.
But that's changing we still,
It's basically a reapplication.
yeah, now you're changing where you want the change, it's. You guys know where I stand.
We would ask that we withdraw our application at this time.
How do we accept that?
Do we move to?
Move to accept the request?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, just move to accept the
I
withdrawal.
make a motion that we accept the request to remove this application.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 4.
Just two action items. We probably need to take action on both
Yeah,
of
let's
them.
take,
Oh, okay.
yeah, let's do.
4, do I hear a motion?
Remove,
Do the withdrawal.
withdraw the application.
We may need the applicant
Yeah.
to request that.
Yeah.
We may not have the authority to
Okay.
withdraw without their request.
Can,
Yeah, we would ask that you withdraw agenda item 4 from the agenda.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Motion
Motion
to
to withdraw.
withdraw agenda item number 4.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item number 5, discussion and public hearing on an ordinance to amend the Farragut Municipal Code, Appendix A zoning.
Hold on.
let these people get out.
Oh, okay.
If they want to, if they're just here for that, you
Okay.
might want to see if they want to stick around, that's fine. Who seconded that on 4? Okay, sorry.
Okay, I'm going to start all over again on item number 5. Discussion and public hearing on an ordinance to amend the Farragut Municipal Code, Appendix A zoning, Chapter 2, definition to define ball field, and Chapter 4, general provisions and exceptions, Section 13, outdoor site lighting, subsection A, to clarify street lighting provisions, establish where ball field lightings may be provided, and prohibit lighting that would be a nuisance due to uncontrolled glare on any adjacent properties, right-of-ways, access easements, or driveway. Farragut Neighborhood Preservation Partnership applicant.
Okay, just an overview here. We discussed this item most recently at the September Planning Commission meeting. And there was a pretty lengthy discussion between the staff and the applicant and the commissioners, and even the town attorney spoke on this as well. And basically, I'd had an ordinance that was ready to be acted on, but there was a request to go back and revisit some some items that were discussed. We talked about the differences between a ball field and a court, tennis court, or something like that. We also talked about what about lighting that is allowed in certain zoning districts like Topgolf. And then we also talked a little bit about just, clarifying where ball field lighting would be permitted. The applicant, is requested to not have it really essentially outside of government properties. And that's basically what is in ordinance 22-12. So there's a couple of things that, in consultation with the town attorney, and we also sent this language to the applicant, and I believe they're okay with this, but we ended up proposing to define what a ball field is as it would apply to this ordinance. And then in the outdoor site lighting section of Chapter 4 of the zoning ordinance, the areas there, the words in red are the ones that are proposed to be added. We had some language that was in the earlier draft talking about protecting residents, because that was really what kind of initiated this request from the start. Then we also referenced that unless provisions are otherwise noted in this ordinance or in the subdivision regulations, then these provisions would apply. So that would address the Topgolf question that came up. And then that basically ball field lighting associated with the government-owned facility that hosts activities for public use and attendance would be where ball field lighting would be permitted. So ball field lighting, either temporary or permanent, would only be permitted in areas where it's directly associated with such government functions. And that's consistent with the law that as it relates to governmental functions versus proprietary functions. And then we also had some language, and this was in the earlier version as well, talking about lighting that could create a nuisance due to uncontrolled glare. Because we have gotten a couple of complaints in subdivisions where somebody put a really annoying spotlight right at somebody's window, and we really didn't have any way to deal with that, and it was really a problem. So we added that language in there as well in cases like where it's blatantly a glaring issue, that we would have some ability to address that. So that's the changes that are basically reflected in Ordinance 2212. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer those.
Anybody on the planning commission have any questions for Mark?
Obviously, this is language that our attorney's comfortable with.
Yes, he and I worked on this language.
Thank you.
Okay, the applicant?
The Farragut Neighborhood Preservation Partnership, first we'd like to thank the FMPC and especially
Jeannie,
Mark Shipley.
Tell us who you are.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
Give an
forgot to.
address. I thought you were going to do that.
I'm sorry, I forgot who I was. I'm Jeannie Brakalski. I live on Crestview Road in Bel Air, and I'm a member of the Farragut Neighborhood Preservation Partnership. I'm here with several of our members here tonight. And so first of all, we'd like to thank the FMPC and Mark Shipley for listening to our concerns and working with us on the amendment to the lighting ordinance. Mark and the staff have been amazing. They have really worked hard. They've kept on top of it. You all have listened to us. You've paid attention to what we've said and what we've asked. And which, as anybody could see here tonight, that is consistent with this board, with the previous applicant. So we really do appreciate your time and hard work. The amendment committee of the FMPP agrees with the wording presented in the packet for the ordinance amendment as written. And we thank you for working with us and listening to us.
And I
Any
do
other-
have one speaker that has
Okay.
signed up for this item if you want to.
Okay.
I have David White. Alderman White.
David White, 314 Visitor Trail. I just want to ask you, Have any of you ever asked the question, why do they want to amend an ordinance that is darn near perfect? You read the old ordinance, no light, no company, not a filling station, not a grocery store, not a restaurant, can have a pole light above 28 feet tall. That's the law. What they've done is weakened it. You're given permission now for the board to violate the code again. It's already been violated once by the new basketball court lights at McPhee, but nobody wants to admit it. It was brought to their attention after the two tall light fixtures were put up, and it was brought to their attention by me. Then we asked the attorney to give an opinion. So the attorney goes, finds case law in states not relative to Tennessee, whereby a municipality does not have to follow their own laws and rules. That's not in the state of Tennessee. It's never been litigated. The only way to find out if that's true is for somebody to litigate it. So they're asking you to give them permission now, because they can put ball field lights, two tall lights on town property, which means all the parks. They're asking you to give them permission to change the code, violate the code. So I just ask you to think about that. There is a code, if somebody would read the code book, that said nothing is to leave this committee with a recommendation of approval unless it's been certified that it doesn't violate any codes or regulations. That wasn't done on McPhee Park basketball court lights. So what's the solution? Do we want to tear them down? No. All I want is you to follow the code. Don't make excuses. Don't do variances and special exceptions after the fact. They've got y'all trying to satisfy the fact that they violated the code. And by you voting to change this ordinance, you're excusing the fact that they made a mistake. It's a simple mistake. Everybody makes them. Didn't check the code. But you guys were supposed to certify. When that final plat for the basketball court went through here, you were supposed to certify, that's the language, certify that there's no violations of the code of any kind. And there was one. And then it went to the board. They passed it, put up the illegal lights. Now we want to stand on the attorney's opinion that a municipality can violate any law they have on their own town property. That's not right. That won't stand forever. Somebody will litigate that. It's up to y'all.
That's all I've had that signed up for this item.
Okay. Anybody else on the planning commission have any questions or comments at this time? Do I have a motion?
I will move to approve, what is this?
22-12.
Is this a resolution?
A
I'm
resolution,
Resolution
PC
PC
22-13.
Thank you, I'm sorry. Move to approve resolution PC 29, is that where it is? 2209, sorry.
Recommend approval of
To approve ordinance 22-12.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Number 6, discussion and public hearing on installation of new small cell poles in the right-of-ways adjacent to 102 Glen Abbey Boulevard, 126 West End Avenue, 100 Smith Road, 11403 Municipal Center Drive, 11509 Parkside Drive, 101 West End Avenue, 100 Brookline Street, 11425 Kingston Pike, Tele-CAD Wireless applicant.
Yeah, this agenda item is on behalf of Verizon. It involves 8 small cell support poles to be installed in different parts of the town, mostly kind of in what's mapped as the town center area, because that's really where the poorest coverage is, and we get a lot of complaints about that, I think, in this area. These would be in the Farragut rights of ways. This is actually the first small cells that we've had since you all approved 11 small cells back in 2020. And if you remember, at that time, 4 of those 11 were in residential areas that affected Stonecrest, Farragut View, and the Covert Turkey Creek. And that obviously drew some concerns from residents. We had a lot of people show up for that meeting. Some of the poles that were approved and put and installed, this is just one down at Kingston Pike across from Jet's Pizza, and then these are a couple that were installed in residential areas along Sonia. And so after that, the planning commission was really kind of bound by the state law. The state legislature made some updates in 2018 to try to facilitate implementation of 4 and 5G infrastructure by, kind of encouraging more small cell support structures to help supplement macro tower cell poles. Now, these are your macro tower poles like our famous pine tree on Concord Road. Those are going to be the ones that are typically over 100 feet tall. They're going to be on private property. Small cell support poles are generally between 25 and 50 feet in height, and they're going to be typically in the public rights of ways, as these 8 would be. Given the fact that the Planning Commission really couldn't do anything but approve what was presented to them in 2020 because of the state parameters, we kind of looked at the state law, and are there things in there that we could work with where we could at least maybe address certain aspects of the small cell poles. And one of the things that is in there is the availability of having an aesthetic plan. And that really, you're not saying you can't put a pole up, but you can have some, controls over what the pole might look like. And so the staff began working on developing an aesthetic plan. And then we had a kind of a small group that included a utility representative to help the staff put together this plan. We workshopped it with the Planning Commission. It took a few months to kind of several drafts to put this together, and then it was eventually approved by the Planning Commission in January of 2021, and then it went to the board, mayor and alderman, and they approved it in February of 2021. So these 8 poles are the first ones that have been submitted under our new aesthetic plan. And as I kind of joked about at the staff developer meeting, this is one time when I feel like I have a purpose in life sometime. Because I think the applicant, to their credit, has really gone through this aesthetic plan, and in the staff's opinion, although there's some things we can talk about as far as colors and things, but I think they've done a great job trying to address the parameters that we have in our aesthetic plan. First of all, they don't have any that are proposed in residentially zoned areas. That's the biggie. All 8 of these are in areas that are zoned commercial. They've also tried to minimize new freestanding poles, which are called a type 3 pole in our aesthetic plan. So 5 of these 8 involve replacing light poles with new light poles that also have small cell support antenna. They did approach LCUB, as is required in our aesthetic plan, to see if there was any way they could locate antenna on their distribution line system, because it frankly would save them a lot of money. But there was just no way to get adequate coverage because the antenna would be so low, and the LCUB doesn't allow you to put antenna above their lines. So in this case, they really didn't have an option to go with LCUB. So like I said, they've tried to minimize new freestanding poles, which is basically a pole where there wasn't a pole of any kind prior with this particular submittal. They've also addressed the physical parameters that are in our aesthetic plan dealing with the overall height. In commercial areas, the poles can go up to 50 feet, and none of these poles are over 50 feet. The material of the pole, these would all be metal poles. We'll go through the look and feel of all of them because you'll see that it's very different from what was installed with the previous 11 approvals. So basically, as you'll see in these pictures, they've got everything more or less inside the pole, and they meet the dimensional requirements of all of our requirements for the pole thickness and the antenna and all that. So at the staff developer meeting, we kind of went through these poles and we talked about maybe different colors that we might want to look at, because a lot of these are in the mixed-use town center. And we looked at the fact that there might be some decorative light fixtures that we would want to have for some of the poles in our town center area. The lights along Brooklawn Street, we're trying to work with that developer to potentially replace those light poles with poles that would have a decorative fixture similar to what's down along Concord Road with TDOT's project. So there might be some poles in this area where we could talk about that and maybe have that as part of the installation. Another discussion item that we'll get to with this pole is one that's to the west of Campbell Station Inn, and there was a request to see if they could move that further west. But the problem is Kingston Pike and the overhead utility lines start to get closer the further you go west, and so they have to maintain an 8-foot clearance laterally from LCUB's lines. So there was really no opportunity to really move it, maybe a couple feet. I don't know if they could speak to that, but not really anything of significance. The pole right now kind of sits in the middle of where that vacant property is that we've had a restaurant kind of look at potentially. Frankly, there's other poles already through there as part of the distribution line system, so it's not like there's nothing already out there that's kind of a vertical utility. But I'll show you that here in a minute. And then the other one was the only one that is proposed anywhere near a residential area is about 50 feet down Glen Abbey Boulevard off of Kingston Pike. And at the staff developer meeting, we had a representative from Glen Abbey, and we asked for their feedback. He went back to their board to see if they had a preference on the color, and he reported that they would prefer to see a green colored pole in that location because they have some trees there and they felt that it would visually blend in better. So
and they
on
have green poles.
I'm sorry.
And they have green poles in their neighborhood.
Yeah, they do have green poles. And one of the things that, to my knowledge, I haven't seen in other areas around here is these poles have a co-location component to them, which is really good. They have more than one antenna on each pole. So, that is another thing that the goal is to not have more new freestanding poles. And so if they can provide more than one antenna on a pole, that can help reduce that need in the future. So that's another thing that they've done with this submittal that is in our plan that is a great thing.
So on a pole, that you can have more than one,
Antenna, yeah.
antenna,
They
but,
have two on each of these poles.
and they can be owned by different companies?
They could speak to that, possibly. I don't know that, but, so if you, it's a little bit hard to see on the screen, but the blue triangles are the locations for these 8. The one that's furthest west is near the Walgreens at Smith Road. And I'll go through all these. The staff's recommendations are really kind of in 2 different categories. We have general comments, and they're really not major. 7 general comments that would apply to all of 8 poles that they would need to address. And then some of the individual poles, we had some comments, or maybe we need feedback from the Planning Commission on thoughts about whether you want to see a certain color or a certain light fixture on a certain pole as we go through those. So,
Mark, before you get any further, I did want to make a statement that, because we went through this, in 2018, Governor Haslam signed the Competitive Wireless Broadband Investment, Deployment, and Safety Act of 2018. And that basically preempted our ordinance, our small cell ordinance that we passed in 2017, and gave us very little control over placement of these. In our ordinance, in the 2017 ordinance was aligned with federal case law at the time. We could not keep the poles from coming into our town either, but we did have a right to prioritize them. And we prioritized commercial as the first, that's where we wanted to see them first. So it kind of is more in line with what our ordinance stated, that's where we prefer to see them,
yeah.
if we're going to have them. But whether it was the 2017 ordinance or the 2018 state law, the federal government has made it very difficult for local governments to resist having these placed in our right-of-ways. So I just wanted to make that clear.
yeah. And our aesthetic plan clearly has a language in there that encourages them to look at commercial properties first, because that's where we had all the rub with those 11. The 4 that were in residential areas, we had a lot of comments about that. So this is like a pole diagram of kind of what they installed, and it's all pretty much straight from our aesthetic plan. You see the 2 antennas at the top, and they have kind of a shield around them called a cantenna, and then the light fixture and the pole. Poles can go up to 12 and 3/4 inch thick, which these are. So, like I said, the action that would be taken would be, from a staff's perspective, action on the general comments that would apply to all poles. And then there's a few of these poles that I wanted to get Planning Commission's feedback on, just to make sure that that the applicant understands what they need to do, and just make sure that the colors and whatever else that might apply to that particular context that we're all in agreement with. So let me just go through these real quick. This is the first pole is there at Glen Abbey, as I mentioned, at the top of the screen. This is Kingston Pike up here, Glen Abbey Boulevard coming in here to the west. The pole's about 50 feet down Glen Abbey Boulevard. This is a little bit detail of the location. This is hard to see, but the main thing is, and this is a little bit hard to see because of the lighting, but it's a green pole. This particular pole is, let's see, I've got a breakdown of all these. I think it's 39 feet. Yeah, 39 feet in height. You can see the 2 cantenna at the top. Everything's in the pole. There will be a meter box on the outside, obviously. There's really no way to put that in the pole. So that's the first location. I don't know if anybody has any comments or questions about that. This is looking at the pole if you're looking south toward Glen Abbey. I haven't had anybody sign up to speak on any of this, so if, I don't know, but if you all have any any suggestions or questions on any of these polls. This particular poll, we didn't have any specific subject tos on this, other than that would apply beyond the general comments. So is everybody okay with this one?
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is, there's two actually proposed on West End Avenue. This one is further north on West End Avenue, and it's actually an existing light fixture that has two lights on it. You can see it there. This particular one is 39 feet in height. And what they're proposing, and this is something that I need to get some guidance from you all. This is in the mixed-use town center area. The poles along West End Avenue are gray. The pole that they're proposing further south that we'll look at later is proposed to be black, because the suggestion was trying to have the poles in the mixed-use town center area be black. And as those get replaced over time, we'll transition to the black. The thing is here, you'll have this pole and potentially the one that we'll look at later to the south near the creek that would be black, but there would be some other poles out there, at least for a while, that'll be gray. So, that's something to think about, as to, whether you want to go ahead and with the new poles just set that theme of black. Another question really here, frankly, is whether you want to look at a decorative fixture on these poles as well. We do have one that's proposed on the pole on Brooklawn Street, because that's something we're trying to actively work on right now with the developer. We don't really have that in place on these other streets that are in the town center, but may, benefit from that in the future. What we did talk about at the staff developer meeting with the applicant was to, at a minimum, have a pole that could accommodate, that decorative fixture at some point if, the town ended up, getting those installed on these poles. So I don't know if y'all have any thoughts on the color of the poles, if you want to just go with what's out there. I think if that's the case, the other pole further south probably also ought to be gray.
That's my
But
opinion,
if
too.
it's
There's
black,
not just these two, but there's several poles.
there's
up and down that are all
several
gray.
through there.
And for now, I think we ought to stick with those poles, that color, and with those light fixtures, because the other fixtures look like that as well.
Yeah.
At some point in the future, if we want to change them, I guess we have that option.
But then we have to deal with these poles that are, my question is, what's the likelihood of those other poles being changed out?
And the time frame of that.
And that's really,
One's outside of Brooklawn Street. It could potentially be a while, before that does occur. I mean, it's all a matter of priorities, I guess, and budgets, but.
In your eyes, what's a while?
Given the financial priorities that I've seen in the paper here lately, it looks like that might be a long while.
Yeah, it could be.
Mark, when we change them out, who's responsible for the cost? We are, right?
Yeah, we would be responsible for that aspect of it, yes. Yep. The main thing is, from my perspective, is you got a pole that could accommodate those type fixtures if we
Yeah.
were to
yeah.
choose to do that at some point in the future. Yeah.
Those type of fixtures will be black, so
Yes, they
I
would.
would have to look at black.
I'd like to see the new poles be black, even if we're going to have a little bit of a mismatch for some number of years. I mean, this is the public right of way, and at some point, if the budget allows, maybe the board, mayor, and alderman could, look at changing some of these fixtures on West End and some other areas over to, number one, fixtures that are a little more historic in nature that would be more compatible with our MUTC.
Show us a picture of that when it's on Brookline.
Yeah, let me show you
Mark.
that one.
Can you please do
It's
that?
a one-headed light fixture. Let's see, I think it's the next one there.
There
It
you go.
actually has the decorative fixture on it, at least as shown on this image.
Yeah, I tend to agree. If our goal is to eventually replace these, even though I know that that's an expensive venture, and certainly right now we have more pressing priorities, at some point that might become something where you do a program where you replace 3 of them a year or something, kind of like what you guys did in Sugarwood. And so, you got to start somewhere. So
About the light fixture, the color, black, what are your thoughts on the light fixture?
I'd like to go and switch over the light fixtures as we're doing this.
I'd say you go with this. If you're gonna do it, do it.
Yeah.
And be done with.
And obviously, we're going to have some light fixtures that don't match for some number of years, but that could be put on a program
People will
that,
think we're silly, but
that
that's it.
that we could work on that over the next 10 or 20 years, just like we have walking trails that don't go anywhere right now, and and the goal is someday the walking trails will connect.
Yeah.
Same thing here. Someday they'll all be
Yeah.
the same.
Cost opportunity.
Yeah, there's never a better opportunity, especially when somebody else is footing the bill for it.
Yeah.
We're not sure really. I'm sure that Verizon will be putting other poles in our town. I mean, this is a group here, but there may be others, so.
Other than the Glen Abbey request, I'd like to see all these poles be black.
I agree. Okay, we'll go through each one. Are y'all okay with that? You understand what? We're just trying to make it consistent. Okay, all right. Let me go back to, that's good. That's good feedback. So, all right, the first pole was that, and we want to go with the black with the decorative light fixture. The next pole is the one on Smith Road. Now, this is, outside of the mixed-use town center, just to the west of Walgreens. They originally were going to put a pole in the Kingston Pike right-of-way, kind of down below Weigel's, but I think they ran into some issues with clearance requirements from TDOT, kind of in that area there. But now it's proposed over here, and this pole, this is a type 3 pole, a new freestanding pole. There's not any poles in this area, and that's basically what it would look like, or what they're proposing. Now, if you all want that one to be black as well, that's...
Those poles over there are gray, though, aren't they? And we're not
However,
changing this.
all new traffic signals in the town of Farragut, whether you're in the MUTC or not,
That's right.
are black.
That's right.
I think we're heading towards the direction of the theme we're trying to create.
Yeah.
It's going to take a while,
Yeah,
but I think this one as well should be black.
I agree.
I agree. I do.
Okay with black?
Yeah.
Just smart.
All right.
They blend into, after a while, after you see them, they blend into
They
you
do.
don't even notice them anyway.
Never even see it.
So that's what that one looks like. The next one, we have already, no, we haven't looked at that. This is one actually on Municipal Center Drive. There's 2 light poles on Municipal Center Drive. This is the westernmost light pole. Near the access that goes into DeVita and ORNL, just to the east of that. And this one has the decorative light fixture. Of course, obviously that's in the mixed-use town center, and they are showing that as black. So that one I think would be consistent with what I've heard from you all. Some of these I have a comment on that to include some of the radio frequency data sheets, and it was on 3 of them, but it was missing from 5 of the 8, and they just needed to add that in there to describe the differences between the 2 antenna. So that was the only subject to on some of these poles individually. So that's what that looks like. This is also set up to accommodate the banner. One thing they tried to do with most of these poles, of course this is different because it has a completely different fixture, but they did try to have the light elevated at roughly the same height as other lights on a larger corridor. So that's a good thing. So that's that one. The next one is on Parkside Drive. We already have some poles out there. This one is actually just to the east of Verizon before you get to At Home. It's on the north side of Parkside Drive. It's a replacement pole. There's an existing light pole there. And that's what it would look like, the replacement pole. Again, trying to get that light fixture roughly at the same elevation as the light fixtures along Parkside Drive, so that there's consistency also in the illumination of the street.
All the other light fixtures on Parkside,
They're green.
Those are green
Yeah.
when it was developed. I could go either way with green or black. I'll go with the green.
Yeah, stay with the green.
Green on that one.
Yeah.
Green on Parkside and Glen Abbey Boulevard. Okay. All right. Next one, West End Avenue. We already looked at this one. This is a replacement pole. There's an existing light fixture just past Turkey Creek, and that would be replaced with something like that, which is pretty nice.
Now, can we switch over to the decorative lighting on that?
Decorative fixture.
I think that since the other one would be decorative, so that one
Right
would
across
be
the street,
decorative.
Yeah, it's close.
There. Okay. Decorative on that one. Okay. And that's what it looks like looking south.
Go back to that picture just a second. We had a former planning commission member, Ed Whiting, who one time when we were talking about this sort of thing, commented about the fact of these poles are not anywhere near as offensive to him as the poles and all these lines. And he's right.
Yeah, particularly with these, like I said, I think they've done about as good as you could do with them, and I think they look great. They just blend in.
That's another pretty penny to bury on.
Oh, yeah, we tried a budget analysis on that years ago,
Yeah,
didn't we?
we went down that road looking at it.
This one's on Brooklawn Street. This is the northernmost pole on Brooklawn Street before you get to Kingston Pike. It's a replacement pole, type 2 pole, and they do show the decorative light fixture there because that's the goal of all those lights along that particular street, to be changed out to something like that. Obviously, the light poles themselves won't be as thick in diameter as this, but it won't be radically different. I think it'll blend in. So that's what that looks like. And then this is the one on Kingston Pike that I talked about earlier that's just to the west of the Campbell Station Inn, in front of the vacant property between Campbell Station Inn and the Truist Bank. And that's the one that we asked them to look at, and they did. It's just, again, the angle of Kingston
It's
Pike
too
in
close.
relation
Kenny
to
did
the overhead utility lines. It starts
here.
getting closer
I mean,
together.
It just is what it is.
And so
It's one of those deals.
So it's kind of right in the middle there. That's what it looks like. Now, there's obviously already poles through that whole area associated with the distribution line system. So, yeah, I don't know if y'all have any thoughts on this. Really, the only way you could move it would be back closer to the end, really.
Is there any consideration of moving it across the highway to the south side of Kingston Pike?
I think they ran into, was it a overhead utility issue with that? Yeah. Yeah, they looked at that.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody have any thought
No, I
on
think
this?
it
Like I
is what-
said, really, the only way they
Okay.
could move it would be actually back toward closer to Campbell
That'd be putting it
Station
further
Inn.
east.
Yep.
It skinnies up right there too, so.
Yeah, I think it is what
It wouldn't be much,
Where it
and you'd
goes.
be starting to get into that visibility of
Yeah.
that. So this probably would be about the best.
I'm going to just ask a question, probably knowing that the answer is probably no, but have you guys had to work with these small cells on private property? I'm wondering if the property owner there would be like, okay, you're putting that right in the middle of the view of somebody's storefront. Would it behoove them to say, let's just give you this portion of the private property, put it on the parcel line, and it would work better for them? I don't know, it's just a question. Have you guys ever had to deal with that, where a private property owner was like, okay, if that's the choice, can we move it here?
We probably need to get them up there. To that point.
Yeah, so it's Jason Kozor with Verizon Wireless. Address is 575 Hickory Hills Boulevard in Whites Creek, Tennessee. First, I want to, thank Madam Chair, members of the commission. All 8 of these sites are here to address some significant coverage concerns that we have from the businesses and the residents in the area. These 8 sites represent a comprehensive solution to that issue, along with additional work that some of our macro team is working on, modifying some of our macro towers that would address a lot of the coverage concerns that exist in this area. We've also worked a lot closer with the transport team to ensure that we're well coordinated with them. You'll see them also on the agenda, and they're here to answer any questions with respect to that as well. In regards to your question, typically the only time I've ever seen a private property proposal is where we can't really achieve the coverage that we need by placing it in the public right of way. So
And
that's
your right.
why.
I understand that. That's your right. It's just, to me, I'm thinking, okay, the private property owner understands that, and I don't know how big a deal it is. You've done commercial, you deal with that. Is this a big deal that you're going to have a pole? I mean, you would have a power pole in the middle of something,
It's just
too.
another utility.
Okay.
There's one there already.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think it's a non-issue as far as marketability or leasing.
Okay.
We've made some significant changes to our equipment that we typically deploy, while still ensuring that we can get the coverage and capacity that we need in order to comply with the aesthetic plan that you guys developed. So I think that, we've got a really well streamlined pole. We've tried to do the best that we possibly can, I think, and making this thing look really
I
good.
thought it was worth having a conversation about.
Of course, yeah, no
I'll
problem.
never have the conversation again.
Are there any other
Oh,
questions?
there's all sorts of
Yeah.
fiber optic in there.
Not now, right, not at this point.
Sure, thank you.
I don't have any citizen comments, but like I said earlier, there were 2 different levels of recommendations. We've kind of already, if you want to just, there was general comments that would apply to all the polls. And those were pretty standard, like providing a letter of credit, clarifying something on the plans dealing with the poll class. Some kind of document, and I did get your email, Jason, about the maintenance. I think we need something a little bit more specific that talks about the maintenance liability and removal of certain things on these poles. Some of these poles are owned by Verizon, some of them will be owned by the town. If it had an existing light that we had, it'll be owned by the town. They'll be responsible for obviously maintaining their structures on our pole. But we might need to have something a little bit more substantial. I'll have to get with the town attorney on that, but, just a little bit better acknowledgement of what could happen in the future with different types of scenarios. Because these poles may not be relevant in 10, 15, 20 years. It may just be a light pole. Who knows? I don't know. But,
So when we get to the motion, you want that included in the motion, that for the town-owned poles, that we have a clearer policy or,
well, I think all of them, because all of them are going to be in our right-of-way.
okay.
They're all on
I think
our-
we've got that covered in that general comment number 3.
Yes, okay,
So I think we're
Yeah.
good there.
okay, so subject twos is.
And then
Thank
just
you.
a statement dealing with the compliance with the federal and state health and safety standards. It might be in there, I didn't see it, and that shouldn't be a big deal. As-built survey, which is something we've always required for both the fiber, which is the next item, and the pole. And then, of course, the right-of-way permit is what would be coordinated with our engineering department, because we have the ATMS project and some other things that are going on in different parts, particularly of this part of town, that we just want to make sure, to the greatest extent possible, we coordinate with them on their fiber and their poles. So with that, that's our recommendations on the general comments. Do y'all want to make a motion on that?
I have a question. Earlier, the question was asked if you can put 2 different
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
carriers on it.
carriers on one pole. You have an answer for that?
Hi, I'm Gene Cowden, 1961 North Point Boulevard, Hickson, Tennessee. I'm with Telecad, so I'm a project manager there. With any pole, this has 2 technologies, minimum two technologies. Some can have 3, to speak to where it can structurally, there can be two providers if need be. The chances of that happening is probably slim, that AT&T or T-Mobile would approach Verizon to want to be on their own structure. But we have equipment in the base, there is coax and power in the pole itself, and then antennas on the top. So there are two technologies on each one of these poles.
So possible but not likely.
Possible but not likely, yes, sir.
Okay.
That's still
Thank you.
better than, it's still better than just having one
yeah,
antenna.
yeah.
That's true, that's true.
So you
Make a
can-
motion to approve the general comments in relation to the 8 small cell towers as described in item number 6. Instead of me going through and reading all those addresses off, I'm just going to put as described in item number 6.
Second.
All
Whoa,
the,
whoa, wait a minute.
That's just the general comments.
The general comment.
Yeah, we're not going to, I'm not approving any of the individual polls yet.
Very good.
Okay, I got it.
you got that? Okay.
And we got a second from Pavlin.
Okay.
All right, vote on that.
So are we voting on that separately?
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay.
Please.
We have a motion
Yeah.
and a second.
Yep.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, now,
So there was a few polls that had staff recommendations on. The 126 West End Avenue was the double light fixture pole on the north end of West End Avenue. Obviously, you all in those areas, we wanted to go with black and the decorative light fixture. So we've got that, plus the other comments there, 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
And with that, I would recommend approval of the one on the pole at 126 West End Avenue.
Move to approve.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Hold on one second.
Break now.
Decorative light.
Oh, we got,
Mark, you'll have to help remind us of which ones we
I
changed to
will.
black. Because there may be a subject too that we may need to add to a couple of these.
Municipal Center Drive, that one just needed the RFDS information. It already shows as being black with the decorative light fixture, so staff recommends approval of that light, or that pole, sorry.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
I'm gonna do all those at once.
Well, let's do them,
that's-
let's do them individually
yeah,
since we're kind of on that track.
we're gonna have to.
On that path.
Yeah.
The other pole on West End Avenue is the one near the creek.
Hold on, we actually need to take a vote on that 11403 Municipal Center, Mark.
Oh, yeah, I got a first and a second.
Yeah.
I didn't get a,
All those in
okay,
favor? Aye.
sorry.
Opposed?
Okay, the next one is the one at 101 West End Avenue, and the suggestion there was to have the decorative light fixture on that. It was shown as black. So with that, plus the RFDS information, the staff recommends approval of that pole.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And then there's the pole at 100 Brooklawn Street. That's one that already is shown as black with the decorative fixture. We just needed the RFDS information.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
And then the last one was the one at Kingston Pike, just to the west of Campbell Station Inn. That is a new freestanding pole. It will be black. It's on the screen there. It doesn't have a light fixture associated with it. And then, so the recommendations were, we've already discussed the placement, so that really wouldn't apply to the recommendation. It would just be the RFDS information for that particular pole.
Motion to approve 11425 Kingston Pike, subject to item number 2.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
So now we just have 3 remaining polls that we need to approve, correct?
Well, they didn't have any comments as
Okay.
far as, they'd had RFDS information
Yes,
with them.
but do we
We
need?
still need an action item on
Yes.
that. I think what Louise is
Yeah.
going towards.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're kind of, we got 3 kind of orphans hanging
Yeah,
out there
that's
without
true. That
being
would be the
technically
one.
approved.
So
Glen
move to
Abbey.
approve
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
102 Glen Abbey Boulevard, 100 Smith Road, and 11509 Parkside Drive.
With-
any color changes
with the color.
With,
With the, well, Parkside.
then
Drive
Parkside
yeah,
is
was
green.
Green, the rest of them were black
Yeah.
already.
Smith Road
Glen
was
Abbey
black.
was actually green.
That's true. So we have two out of the
Abbey
three are
and
green.
Parkside are green, the
And
one at
Smith Road will be
Smith
black.
is black, yeah.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
We're gonna get 10 green poles.
All right, you have anything?
Thank you, everyone.
questions?
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Job.
Now you want to wait?
I don't think we have.
We'll go on with this and then we'll take a break.
Okay.
Okay, item number 7, we're still talking fiber optic cable here. Discussion and public hearing on an installation for underground fiber optic cable to service new small tower cell poles in the right-of-way adjacent to 102 Glen Abbey Boulevard, 126 West End Avenue, 100 Smith Road, 11403 Municipal Center Drive, 11509 Parkside Drive, 101 West End Avenue, 100 Brookline Street, and 11425 Kingston Pike, FiberLink applicant.
Yeah, this is just the fiber extension to service the small cell poles that we just looked at. I don't know if you need me to go through these individually or if you're okay with these. It's all underground. They'll be bored, directional boring. So this is, and these are in the same order as the poles were. This is Glen Abbey, the fiber extension coming in from the east. Then you had the one at West End, one near Walgreens.
Gonna be handling the
This would actually be handled by FiberLink. They're the applicant for
Okay.
this. It's a different entity than the pole installation.
We just want to make sure that we're taking care of on well, during the whole project, that we're not disrupting as much as possible.
Yeah, right, yep.
And then
okay.
it's brought back to nice grass and,
Yeah, that's one of the subject twos for this particular item as well.
yeah.
So, yeah, and that's pretty much all they're doing, is just extending the fiber. This is on Parkside, West End.
Mark, how much of it is open ditch versus directional bore?
I think all of it's directional bore. Isn't that right? Yeah.
Okay.
I have some folks here that could answer questions
that makes
about
it
the
easy.
fiber, but yeah, it's all directional bore. So that's pretty much the plan for this particular agenda item. The subject to is on the staff's approval. This also would require a right-of-way permit to be coordinated with engineering, just to make sure that there's not conflicts with things that we're working on that we know about.
FiberLink.
That-
Well, they're
I was
here.
gonna
The
ask
applicant's
you
here.
They're
before.
here. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm Mike Micah with MCI Verizon Business, and this is,
Hi, Josh Day, FiberLink.
And you all are okay with these subject twos?
absolutely, yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
I'm going to move to approve with the subject twos.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna take a 5-minute break.
Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. I don't.
Pretty good. I don't think it's gonna be as late as we thought there, but it's gonna be probably 10 o'clock.
Going to re-adjourn the meeting. We're on item number 8. Discussion and public hearing on a site plan for the Farragut Town Center at Biddle Farms Townhouses, parcel 3.24, tax map 143, 47 unit, zone PCD, Bud McCullum applicant.
Yeah, this item is a request for approval of a site plan. It really is a preliminary plat because this is a subdivision, and they're basically presenting infrastructure plans, construction plans to provide the infrastructure to serve this subdivision. This was looked at as kind of a concept back in July. This area was originally, when the area was rezoned to PCD, the concept plan showed this as future development. And of course, obviously, they didn't know what they were going to do with this portion of the PCD. They got this plan that came in because it was a major change to the PCD, completely new development in an area that was shown to be future development. Then it had to go through you all and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, which it did. And now they've been kind of working on the more detailed preliminary plat since that time. This particular layout is similar to and pretty much exactly what was shown on the concept plan. You can see that this is a site layout sheet. There's a local street that would go around the periphery, and then this shaded street in here would also be a public street to provide legal public street frontage to these townhomes internally. There's kind of an outdoor gathering space in this location, and so that's kind of an overview of the layout. Again, you all have already more or less seen this. We reviewed this at the staff developer meeting on November 1st and kind of went through some of the staff's comments. One of the comments was that some of these will be a local public street. The shaded areas will be public streets. And so on local streets, unless you obtain a variance, there is a 6-foot grass strip width between the sidewalk and the street curb. And the reason for that is to provide enough physical space to have street trees at some point, and then also to give you a little bit more of a buffer between the pedestrian and the motorist. So that's one thing that they're showing actually is 3.5-foot grass strip, which was what was on the concept plan, I believe. We didn't really look at it from that level of detail because the concept is more just kind of here's generally what we're looking at and where we want to put it. But that is something that you all would need to take action on, that variance request separately before you take action on the plan itself. What they're proposing to do in terms of the street trees is put those on the other side of the local street where there's more physical space, and you can see that here. Instead of it's pretty tight. I mean, this whole area is really tight. That was kind of something we talked about at the November staff developer meeting as to whether they could kind of widen that area just a little bit to free up a little bit more space between the units themselves, turnaround areas, and then also maybe this grass strip area. This is a 26-foot wide street. They are going to designate some areas for parking, on-street parking here. It's also a very curved street, and there'll be a raised pedestrian crosswalk through this particular area here. So all those things collectively, really people shouldn't be going very fast on this street. So the question of whether you need a 6-foot grass strip separation for a buffer purposes is something that would need to be evaluated in this particular context. So that's some background on that. As far as and this is kind of that parking diagram that they're looking at. And we talked about this at the November 1st staff developer meeting. Going in and staff's recommendation, one of our recommendations on this item is just to go ahead and stripe those areas to where it makes sense to have parking, because if you don't, then it's going to be kind of a free-for-all, and you may be having people parking in areas where they really wasn't intended to park, like right in front of a unit, or maybe in a area where it's not particularly a safe place to park. And it also kind of adds an element of traffic calming, because you're physically designating on-street parking onto that street. So that's kind of what that would look like. The fire lane would be interior. It's kind of that orange area that would be closer to the sidewalk that is in front of the different units. These would actually be rear-loaded units that would have alleyways. The alleyways are 25 feet in width. So all the townhomes actually, as far as their presentation to the public street, they won't have driveways. They'll be presenting the buildings directly to the public street with a pedestrian facility in front of those. This is the community fire pit and pavilion that's kind of in that center portion of the development. And now, just talking about the buildings themselves, there'd be mostly brick, 2- and 3-story mixture with some terraces. These are, we looked at this at the staff developer meeting. They've kind of evolved the building appearance over time. Really, from the feedback that I've received on the newer buildings, there's kind of a lot of positive feedback on the look and feel of those. So some of the brick patterns, different types of brick tones and colors, and earth tones throughout all of the applications. One thing they did want to get the Planning Commission's feedback on were the light fixtures for the residential units. These would be the wall-mounted fixtures, to try to maybe have some consistency throughout the development. There's kind of this more historic lantern style. They did kind of go away from the gas light just for cost purposes. And that's one option. And then the gooseneck would be another option that they would be looking at. But I think the goal would be to have a consistency. Since this is really single-family residential, unless it creates some uncontrolled glare, it would really be exempt from our outdoor site lighting. So you could potentially have a fixture like that, although you couldn't normally in most areas. But as long as it doesn't create kind of an uncontrolled glare issue, then that would be something that would be permitted as a wall-mounted light for a house, for an attached single family. This one would be better in terms of controlling glare, because the light source would be recessed into the fixture head. So I don't know if you all have a opinion one way or the other on these different fixtures. I know in walking up around the North Shore Town Center, they've got kind of a variety of different fixtures, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I think the goal here was to have a little bit more consistency.
Is that a goal driven by staff? Is that a staff request, or is that something more
No.
driven by the applicant?
Well, I mean, and they can speak to that. Maybe that's not a goal, but the feedback I got was they wanted to get some feedback on which kind of light fixture they would go with. So I assume that what they're trying to do is to have some kind of consistency with the light fixtures.
I mean, my thought is for a development like this to be authentic, that you would have more diversified styles of lights, not everybody having a matching light.
Maybe just have some options to choose from, and have a variety. Yeah. I don't know.
Unless the applicant has a particular reason that they want them all to match. I mean, if they want them to match, it's fine. I just thought that, being that we don't necessarily like the architecture to be cookie cutter from the one next door to it, same thing with the light fixtures. I think the idea is if you had these townhouses built in an historic setting, you would have
Right.
townhouses built over probably multiple decades, and they're all going to have different veneers, different windows, different lights.
Yeah, I'm open to that. I don't know, that was kind of my understanding from the applicant, but they can speak to that. If they don't have a preference, then I'm fine with having a mixture personally. But
Well, I don't know
it
if
gives
they
it a little
have it-
bit more organic feel.
If they're trying to create a gas flame-like light.
That's what that one would
Traditional
be,
kind of thing,
something
and more
similar.
consistency through it, be kind of like what you'd see in a period. I'm open either way myself. It's just, what's the intent? To have it look like it's a single period of where the lighting with the gas lights, or is it?
They'd have
We
to
don't matter.
speak to that.
If we're going to treat this as single family and we're not going to have jurisdiction over it, I'm not even sure we need to discuss it.
Yeah.
I mean, unless, I'm just ready, I'm okay with the applicant just, unless they're creating,
Basically, you're okay with
glare
either
or
one.
traffic safety issues out on the public right-of-ways or
what's the-
driveways, then otherwise, I'm okay with letting
That's
them
true.
do what they want to do.
it's exempt.
Can we
so-
hear what they have to say?
Yeah, I mean, if
Come
they
on up.
want some feedback, then that's up to them.
Alex Birch, 814 East Woodland Avenue. Just want to say first off, Bud was under the weather today, so filling in for him. Yeah, basically for the lighting, we were potentially going for a gas light, but then we got some costs back and realized that was not feasible. So we wanted to find an electric light that was similar to our gas fixture, and that's our first light right here. And the second one, we wanted to kind of incorporate what the retail was doing in the development, because I know they have goose lighting on the retail buildings, so we just trying to combine the whole PCD into one, but understand what you guys are saying with, we were kind of concerned with the glare, but since it's single family, it sounds like it's exempt and don't have to worry about it too much, unless it's significant glare.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I think you have freedom to do whichever one you want, or.
But before you
or
step down, I do have
others.
a question for you, Alex. I think I'm real intrigued with this style of product, and I think the town will there's a demand for this and this type of density, and I think that this won't be the last time we see a product like this that comes before the Planning Commission. So my question to you is to kind of help us get it in perspective. What kind of density, if you took and kind of drew a square around your townhouse development and took that number of acres, how many units per acre? Because I think it might help a lot of us when we're talking about density at other places in the town of Farragut. Well, this type of product is X number of units per acre. I know your project's a little bit different because it's a larger, cohesive, master planned project, but it would help us if we kind of drew a block around your project and said, hey, all right, we're dealing with 7 acres and we've got 47 units, then we can do the math.
Yeah.
But your best guess? I mean, I'm sure
it's it's a little over 7 acres, 47 units, so.
So basically
about-
6 units. This is kind of what a 6 unit per acre type product looks like.
sir.
Obviously, your architecture is pretty awesome. At least I personally think so, and it may not be appealing to other people, but it helps us kind of say, okay, this is what 6, without going vertical, this is what 6 units an acre looks like. Okay.
More like 7 units when you
Yeah.
look at the.
Yeah, it's a
pull up
little
the
over
numbers, about
7.
units
Okay.
an acre.
I looked at it.
Okay.
But you know, Farragut Crossing, Farragut Commons, Farragut, which one's the one that's the condos?
Commons.
That's
Commons.
That's 7 units an acre.
Okay. And the footprints are probably not a whole lot different than these are bigger
Yeah.
because they're more vertical.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so let's go
Right,
through
right.
the different building
Right.
elevations, and just to show you those, these are the, obviously, these are 3-story options. With each unit kind of has its own look and feel. It's side elevation. This is the back elevation, the access from the alley. This is the 2 and 3 mix they have in some of these buildings.
Mark,
That
can
would-
you go back to the one with the parking? I'm trying to understand the rationale for delineating some areas as available for on-street parking and other areas not. If it was a fire code issue, I could definitely understand that.
It is.
So those
It's
areas that we
related to
delineated that
that.
are no parking, even though the fire lane is actually up against the buildings, which says fire lane to be inside lane of Loop Road, we're delineating some of these other areas for no parking. So I guess somebody could get around a fire truck if a fire truck was blocking the road there. Is that the purpose of the
There's 4-story, so considered 4 stories.
Ladder truck.
Yeah, it's for the outriggers.
ladder truck? So
Personal
multiple,
equipment.
so that's,
You just need more
okay.
room.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. And I like, would it make more sense to narrow the road in those locations and run basically a kind of a traffic calming or an area where the curb comes in and comes back out and
They do have a
make that,
raised-
instead of just striping it off, just,
They have a raised crosswalk through here that will be a traffic calming feature.
I like that.
I guess what am I thought, instead of just striping this area off to say no parking, I mean, if it can't be used for parking, then maybe there's no reason to even pave it.
So I don't know, that'd be a question too for the fire marshal, but
Yeah.
I think he's wanting equipment to have a more solid base.
Well, I
so.
think they're flexible on some of the ways that you can provide them with. It doesn't have to be paved and curbed and all that, but it does have to have.
Well, I was just looking for an opportunity for less impervious surface, and if all of a sudden, if it's not eligible for parking, maybe it could just be grass. You know, it's
Yeah,
probably.
because the outriggers expand 14 feet wide when they set, so it's
this is something
basically
for a ladder truck.
Yes, yes, sir.
I assumed y'all talked to Dan Johnson. Dan Johnson said, hey, we need some areas to be able to spread the outriggers out. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Well, no, then that's asked and answered. Thank you.
While I've got you here too, I just wanted to ask a question, maybe a comment too, regarding the variance request for the grass strip. If that's shrunken down to 3.5 feet and there's no room to put any like taller trees in there, would there be an opportunity to put some low profile landscaping, such as maybe a hedgerow or some kind of aesthetic element that would still maintain a buffer without planting trees?
You might be able to do some understory trees, some small, dogwoods or redbuds, crepe myrtle. I mean, so there might be some other trees that are, I think we call them understory
In certain sections.
in certain
Yeah, that's what I was
areas
thinking,
that
too.
are,
That's-
not going to have invasive roots and not going to have big limbs that grow over the buildings.
Or into the foundation.
I kind of like the idea of hedge because that kind of goes with the historic nature of what you're doing here. We need to make sure it's not creating any safety issues or line of sight issues.
That's what I was thinking for the low profile, something of the
but maybe-
hedge that would be, you would still maintain the aesthetic element, but you still have the buffer from the street over to the sidewalk.
So they're coming to come in here to.
I mean, it's probably a VRRB issue more than it is our issue, but those might be some things that we encourage you guys to kind of digest and explore.
Looking more at different species of the trees that we can
Or
fit in
smaller
there.
understory. You don't want to put anything big in 3.5 feet. It just doesn't work. It'll buckle
Sidewalk,
sidewalks.
That's on us.
Okay, do we have any more questions?
So we have to do the variance first.
Right.
yes.
You're right, VRRB will deal with.
So the variance is just reducing the grass strip width
6
from
to
6
3.5.
to 3.5 feet. That's
Yep.
it. For those reasons, what are the reasons
I
for
was
this?
going to say, we probably need to spell out
Street
what the,
trees are on the other side.
Yeah.
More open room for them.
maybe proximity of the dwellings to the edge of the right of way might be another one. You know, worrying about, roots getting up under foundations.
Okay. So I'm going to move to approve the variance request, reducing the grass strip width from 6 feet to 3.5 feet due to street trees being provided on the opposing side of the street and proximity of the houses to the right-of-way. Is that right?
Sounds good.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
On the plan itself, again, it's pretty consistent with the concept plan that you all already looked at. We did have 13 subject twos on that.
You guys have any issues with the subject twos?
We do not.
You do?
We do not.
Okay.
Sorry.
Move to approve with the 13 subject twos?
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, Alex.
Item number 9, discussion and public hearing on the approval for final plat for the Ivy Farm subdivision, phases 2 and 3, parcels 5401, tax map 151, 30.39 acres, 101 lots, zoned R-1 OSR, Goodall Homes applicant.
This item is for the next two phases of the Ivy Farms subdivision north of Union Road. This was the phase exhibit that was included with their preliminary plat. Phase 1 included the road coming in off of the roundabout Duckfoot Lane, and it went across the drainage area and mainly included a street named Baltica, which is this curved street here. It runs against part of Saddle Ridge to the west. So phases 2 and 3 would extend Ivy Farms Road and then also create a new road, Oakley Ivy Drive, that would come off of Ivy Farms Road. Would essentially be a two-ended cul-de-sac. That's Oakley Ivy Drive. So it's basically this area and this area would be the shaded areas, or what they're platting at this time. It involves 101 lots, some walking trail sections, and a stormwater detention basin. And this is the final plat for that. As you're coming in on Ivy Farms Road, this is Baltica that's going kind of southwest. And then this is the extension of Ivy Farms Road. And then the other road that's coming in off of that. The detention basin is in the area here off of the entrance area. This is the northern part of these two phases. There are some walking trail sections. The staff has gone out and conducted a field inspection and are satisfied with the progress that they've made and where they're at this point in terms of being ready for action on their final plat. There are some remaining subject twos on this item, which completing the remaining field items is one of them. Obtaining the signatures. There's some completion and maintenance letters of credit, which are typical for final plats. They actually have 7 traffic calming islands that they requested to get a letter of credit for right now, because they're afraid that they'll get kind of banged up and damaged during house construction. So we do have a letter of credit that would cover that. The sidewalks will be installed similar to most of our newer subdivisions as houses are built, where the sidewalks are required. And then the streetscaping as well, the street trees will be added as part of individual building permits. So that's mostly the subject twos. Also the covenants, having a copy of the recorded covenants and restrictions for these two phases, and the stormwater maintenance repair plan and stormwater agreement, which is something that we require for new developments as well. But those subject twos, the staff recommends approval of these two new phases of the Ivy Farm subdivision.
Is there somebody with the applicant here?
Mark, I've got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
It's kind of hard to tell. Go back to that other, where you see the, I guess that's the walking trail.
Yeah, there is a trail around.
Okay, that crosses,
Here, this area.
yeah. Is that a raised crosswalk right there for traffic?
There will be some of those. They are also part of the completion letter of credit.
Okay. Okay, is there another one on up the way there?
Yeah, I think there is another one, isn't there, Annette?
There's a couple of them.
Yeah, there's
Yeah, I see the one on cul-de-sac, but back the other way.
I can't remember where the other one is.
Back to that other one again.
Oh.
Looks like it may be between lot 60 and 59.
Yeah, there. I'm not sure. I know they have more than one. I just can't remember where.
There's one on the other road.
There, yeah, I think there's one on this secondary road, but I can't remember exactly where.
I'm thinking it went up
Oh, that's.
Be part of phase one?
It's part of Phase 4.
The next phase.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go to that master one that you had there.
Yeah, the last
Oh, okay.
phase is this.
Yeah,
this
there
long
it is.
Extension
Well, that
here.
hooks in with this one, so,
Yeah, but we're not
That would
approving.
be the-
Right.
We're not approving that one tonight.
right, yeah.
But I think there's another.
I think there's two, as I
Crosswalk.
remember on the race crosswalk. I know
We
there's
got here,
one.
here.
And I think there's another one.
So you guys aren't connected into the Fox Run Trail that's at the end of Serenity until the Phase 4, it
The
looks
next
like.
phase, that's right.
Okay.
Now, that phase actually has a lot of walking trail.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah,
Be
that'd
nice.
be a good connection. There are some sections in this section, but as you can see in this next phase, all this is a walking trail, and then this, so it's got quite a bit. And it'll bring this into the trail that they've constructed as part of this phase that stubs out here currently. So all that would come with the next phase.
And you all are okay with all the subject twos?
Yes.
Can I make a motion to approve with the subject twos?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Hey, Mark, I assume there wasn't any citizen comments on that?
No.
Item number 10, discussion and public hearing on approval of a final plat for the Grove at Boyd Station, Phase 1, Unit 2, 27.63 acres, 66 lots, zoned R-1, OSMR Lynch Surveys, LLC applicant.
And this one is the next phase of the Grove, just to the southeast of Phase 1. If you look at the top here, this is the roundabout, McPhee. The first phase brought in this iron plow drive, and it also platted a cul-de-sac off of that. This next phase would extend our iron plow drive to just southeast of the second roundabout, and then it would have connected into each roundabout a new street, Branch Hook Road, that would serve 66 single-family attached units. These would be buildings that each have 3 units within each building. In the middle of this is where the amenities facilities will be located, and we had a site plan that we looked at and approved back in August for that. So that's gives you kind of an orientation of where this fits within the development. This is one of 2 areas where they have attached single family. It was approved as part of their OSMR zoning. Down here to the south, this is Boyd Station Road. There's a detention basin part of this phase here. And they've got the walking trail constructed to a point, but, you know, depending on what happens with Boyd Station Road, obviously they'll have to connect into that. And then some other walking trail sections. So that's similar to the Ivy Farms. They'll be constructing sidewalks as part of building permits where the sidewalks are shown to be installed. They have also provided maintenance and completion letters of credit for things that we would want them to cover or complete. And that's pretty much an overview of it. The staff recommends approval of this phase, subject to those 7 comments, which are pretty much the same as what we had for the Ivy Farms with different dollar amounts for the letters of credit.
Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Right there.
Yes. Thomas Krajewski, 122 Perimeter Park Drive.
Are you okay with the subject twos?
We're fine with all the subject twos.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Make a motion to approve with the subject twos.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Commission.
Item number 11, discussion and public hearing on a concept plan for Virtue View Farm subdivision, parcels 33.03 and 33.04, tax map 152, 33.03 and 152, 33.04, 44.9 acres, 13 lots, zoned R-1, Steve Williams, applicant.
Yeah, and this item was reviewed for discussion purposes back in July. And it involves a concept plan for the properties at the intersection, southwest intersection of Virtue Road and Evans Road. This is a concept that includes 13 lots, and they range in size from 1.2 acres to over 14 acres. So it's kind of a larger lot, rural kind of character that they're trying to create here with this. They did have a number of variances that they introduced to the Planning Commission at that workshop session. Most of those we got through and had a pretty, I think, some clarity on. There's a couple of, ones that I think the applicant wanted to revisit. This appears to me, I don't think they really made any substantial changes to the concept plan. So, if you do want to take action on the concept plan, the staff would not be able to support it as submitted because there's a couple of variances in there that they're requesting that the staff does not support. We do support a number of the variances that they're requesting, kind of like what we talked about when this was workshopped. But if they're just wanting some additional feedback on these variances, then that would need to be the action taken and not action on the concept plan. And my understanding is from Mr. Williams that I think that's what they're looking for. I can go through those variances since it's been a couple of months or so since we looked at this. The first one was to not have a detention pond, and the staff was okay with that. Again, these are all based on the concept presented at this time. If when they get and submit the more detailed preliminary plat, if it has some things that notably change this, and obviously we'll have to revisit, our position on it and evaluate it accordingly. But based on this, no detention pond, and staff was okay with that because this area is so close to the lake. It would just, the timing and everything, and the lots are very large. So that would make sense. The second one was a private 20-foot wide road with no curbs and instead using grass swales. As I mentioned at the workshop session, private streets are not permitted. They haven't been permitted for a number of years. In either the subdivision regulations or our zoning ordinance, it requires public street frontage for new lots. And it wouldn't be consistent with the connectivity objectives of our comprehensive land use plan, trying to create interaction in an interconnected town, and this would not be consistent with that. So we wouldn't be able to support the private street variance. The grass swales, we would be able to support that. Given the lot sizes, this would provide for really enhanced water quality for this type of development. Whether the 20-foot wide street is sufficient, we've had a couple of comparable developments, one off Dixon Road, Sassafras Meadows, but it only had 4 lots, and they were all over 5 acres. So that one had a 20-foot wide road, but it also had a 50-foot right-of-way. And then Ray Kinney's development off Union Road just a few months ago, that one had 6 lots, and it had a 20-foot road and a 40-foot right-of-way, I believe. So that would be similar to what they're requesting here. That as far as the street width, I'm never in favor of more width than you really need. So that's something that I think the commission was open to when this was discussed as a workshop item. The gated entry, that's kind of related to the private street. Staff couldn't support that. I think if they want to gate their driveways, that's certainly fine, and we have plenty of those in town. Cul-de-sac length, this cul-de-sac is about 911 feet. the maximum that we allow is 500 feet. Staff's okay, we're okay with that variance because what they're trying to do with the design is actually good. The good design, they're working around some trees in this area that they're trying to save, and then staying off of the steepest part of the development so they wouldn't be grading into the steep slopes. So, and that's part of the reason for the length of the cul-de-sac, because of the meandering and not really connecting to any vehicular system nearby. So that one is another one that we were in support of. And then no vehicular connections to other roads or walking trail or sidewalk connections to any adjoining property. Based on the number of lots and the topography, the staff was in support of not having a vehicular connection. As you know, there's a right-of-way that's stubbed into this property from the Grove. And again, given what was presented with this concept and the topography, we were okay with not having a vehicular connection. We did talk about pedestrian facilities, and I went back and watched the video, and I mean, I don't think we got any real clear direction one way or the other than I don't believe there was an appetite to have one that went up the slope. What you did, there was some discussion about, you know, that was a pretty steep trail that would be going up.
How steep is that? Percentage?
It would be obviously less than 20%, which is our maximum, but it would be between
I mean, we have a steep,
12 and 18%.
we have a steep trail in Fox Run that used to be the old,
Yeah, oh yeah.
we use it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, that water tower, the last
Yeah.
pitch on that thing is steep. That was just what was discussed at that time. But I mean, again, I don't think we had complete clarity on the pedestrian facilities. I do believe from the staff perspective that this development needs to provide for context-appropriate pedestrian facilities, whether it's facilities themselves or easements or granting easements at some point. 'Cause that's what we did with Tucker's development and off of Dixon. He granted some easements for if we were ever to connect to nearby trails or sidewalks, that would be there. Same thing with Ray Kinney. He had a 20-foot pedestrian easement along Union Road that he platted as part of that, even though he didn't have to build the facility at this time. That just gives, you know, more space to work around certain things if you were trying to save a tree or something like that, to provide for those facilities at some point in the future. Because Evans Road and Virtue are both major collectors, and you know, even though it might not make sense to have a pedestrian facility on both sides of those roads right now, it could make a lot of sense in 20 years from now. So we, as the Planning Commission, I think need to be thinking about what that area could look like at some point in the future, and as part of any development that comes before us, to have those provisions put in place. So we would not be able to support not having any kind of provisions for pedestrian facilities, because we haven't had any developments that I can remember that have had no provisions for pedestrian facilities, and so that would be something that we couldn't support. But the 10% open space, omitting that, the staff was okay with that. Given the size of the lots, they lend themselves to open space just on the lots themselves. Some of the lots have a width to depth ratio issue. That was something that was talked about quite a bit at the July workshop, and the Planning Commission seemed to be, based on the size of the lots and the topography, okay with that. And then the last one's kind of related to an earlier one, excuse me, and that was no road improvements to Virtue or Evans, including construction of any sidewalks or walking trails. So, you know, as noted earlier, the provisions for pedestrian facilities, whether they actually are constructed at this time, should be part of this development, something that's, you know, context appropriate, whether it's an easement at this time, or granting easements at some point. That would be something that I think needs to be discussed further. Again, that's what we did with these other rural subdivisions that had actually half the lots of what this subdivision has. Road improvements to Virtue and Evans to bring those roads into the complete street cross-section, that would not be proportional to what is being presented at this time. So I don't think we would expect them to improve those roads to that standard as part of this subdivision. So that's kind of an overview of the variances. Again, are pretty much the same ones that we talked about a few months ago. So if y'all have any questions for me, I'll try to answer that. I know the applicant's here.
I think, Mark, if I could just interject, that Steve Williams, 721 Virtue Road. I think what we're trying to do is work out, we're not trying to get a vote, we're trying to work out where we're at. Talk about this a little bit more.
Okay.
And if I could go ahead and try to attack the pedestrian walking trail, if you want to call it sidewalk walking trail, on Evans and Virtue. My fence that's out there now is set at 30 feet from the center line. So you can see if you drive by there, there's room on Evans in particular. If you ever decided to put a sidewalk on my side, there's all kinds of room to put one there. It's already ready to go. So my existing fence that's there is at 30 feet from center line. And I called Mark to tell him what I was doing when we were building the fence. We rebuilt the fence. On Virtue Road, my fence is set at 30 feet from center line. And when I looked at the plans, Daryl was kind enough to send me I guess your concept plan of what you're going to do in Virtue Road. It shows a sidewalk on my side of the new Virtue Road, and it would fit, according to the plan that I looked at, it would fit within that 30 feet from the center line. So that would always be taken care of. If that helps out any. So I think the 30 feet from the center line for the property line, if we do this, takes care of the sidewalk on Virtue and Evans.
I think the reason that at Union, for example, with Ray's is to get the additional easement is during construction, just having that additional flexibility. We could probably fit it in the right of way there too, but that gives us a little bit more room if we had to, and I know you got the fence thing, but again, it just gives you a little bit more flexibility, or, if you needed to do something with the grade, or, those kinds of things that could come up during a road improvement project. So that was the logic behind the one on Union Road, and the same would be here in this case.
I would say I agree with staff's concern about a private street. I can't support a private street. You certainly have a solution in that you could gate those lots are deep enough that you could gate each one if they wanted to have a gated driveway, but I can't support a private street. We've had so many issues in the past, and I don't care what you put out and post on the plat. 20 years from now, those residents are coming in 25 years when they need to have that repaved, and you're sticking a board, mayor, and alderman with a crappy decision of.
We want you to take over the streets.
Yes. And
We've
so
been down that road
just-
before.
That's the reason we don't do it, so,
Yeah,
I mean,
so that,
simple.
and I know we have that space reserved for at least a pedestrian trail in Boyd Station, and I hate to lose that connection. I understand, Mr. Williams, your concern from a security standpoint, and yeah, it's quite a grade, but we have a lot of our trails at certain grades, higher grades. It's a very valuable thing to have for the residents. They'll be able to walk the residents that live here will be able to access McPhee Park very easily, safely through another neighborhood walking. It really is an asset in our community, and people really look at it that way. So I'm struggling with losing that, but.
Yeah, one of the things we did with Tucker's, if you remember, we asked him to plat an easement for a trail in the future that would tie into Rockwell Farm.
Yeah.
If you remember that.
Yeah.
So that might be a solution here, instead of building it at this time, but platting the easement
Yeah.
so that if it made sense at some point in the future, it would be available for
For us
that.
to do. But
Yeah,
it would be
if, that's just something to think about. That's what we did with Tucker's. And again, he had half the lots is what is being proposed here.
I guess my rebuttal to that would be, you've got Evans Road, and my understanding is the sidewalk on Evans is going up to McPhee. Soon?
But how do they access that?
They just walk out to Evans and walk up the sidewalk.
Have you got a sidewalk that, I can't tell, but.
Yeah, there's a sidewalk directly across the street on Evans.
No. I mean, have you got a sidewalk in your
No.
cul-de-sac? So
No.
they're gonna walk in the road?
Yeah, it's 20 feet wide and it's only 9 lots. Yeah, it's already 20 feet wide.
So you're not building a sidewalk inside this
No,
unit? Okay.
no, that doesn't make good sense there, but if you got a 20-foot road and then you're going up to a sidewalk, a very nice sidewalk on Evans that I understand will soon be connecting all the way to McPhee.
It's gonna be heavy.
It's on the opposite side of the road?
Yes. And with us already saying 30 feet from the center line, you have room on our side if you ever wanted to build an additional sidewalk. I mean, I don't see how the sidewalk on our side would help because you got the cemetery, and I don't think you can ever go through there with a sidewalk, so I don't see how that would help.
I don't think there's room in there between the existing Evans Road and the cemetery and that giant oak tree. I don't think there's any way to get a sidewalk in on
I don't think so either.
the south side of the road.
Yeah.
I agree.
Steve, I think probably the bigger issue that I would suspect if I were in your shoes, I'd want to hammer out tonight is this issue of private roads and gates and you know, how important that is to you.
Well, I agree with that, but I'd rather, and I appreciate that what I'd rather talk about is this connection of the platted easement back to Boyd Station, because to me, that's the biggest deal. And the law, the Tennessee law changed in July. So it's under a whole new viewpoint now. Everything that the Planning Commission asked for now, and I've got someone here to explain that in just a minute, Taylor. Everything that you ask for now has to be proportional and a nexus to the development. And quite frankly, I just don't see how that has anything to do with us. And to me, that's a big deal because you're taking what we're doing and cutting through. It's a cut through. You're taking 285 lots, if I remember correctly, plus whatever else is up there at McPhee, and you're basically taking our property and turning it into a cut through. And that's my biggest deal.
We're talking about the pedestrian access up at
Yes.
the top of the hill. Okay.
It's not a
Absolutely.
cut-through then. It's just
What your attorney has to say. I mean,
Sure.
any opportunity that we can educate
Yeah,
ourselves about
and it's
what
a
the
new
law
thing.
is, I'd like to understand it.
facilities is a cut.
I don't see any reason to have it. I don't see any reason to have it.
They're speeding and
Taylor Forrester, 1111 North Shore Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37919. Again, not necessarily an expert on this, but have spent a great bit of time since this new law came out. So this law, the statute was amended around the same time we were here for discussion purposes. And what the statute is with the section dealing with subdivision regulations and the enabling clause that gives local municipalities and counties the right to enact subdivision regulations and have certain police powers. So the amendment, it's kind of surprising we hadn't already had this because there are two longstanding U.S. Supreme Court cases known as Nolan and Dolan. It's a two-pronged test, Nolan-Dolan standard, that deals with exactions, eminent domain type of scenarios. So basically, the legislature finally brought our statute into compliance with the Nolan-Dolan standard. So what the amendment provides is planning commission shall not require an owner of private property to dedicate real property to the public unless there is an essential nexus between the dedication and a legitimate local governmental interest, and the dedication is roughly proportional both in nature and extent to the impact of the proposed development of the property. These dedications and conditions commonly referred to as exactions. And it falls under the Fifth Amendment of the taking clause. Government taking a property by eminent domain is probably your most common when they're, anytime you have eminent domain, TDOT comes in, expands the right of way, they pay compensation to the property owners. how municipalities can get away at times without paying compensation or exactions if they can establish this essential nexus and the proportionality test. So the exactions are permitted without compensation as long as the exaction fairly represents the impact caused by the development. So what type of impact does this new development have on our infrastructure, our roadways, sidewalks, school system, things of that nature? And falls under the due process clause is what allows these local governments to exact property or something of value from a property owner without compensation, provided, as stated earlier, the essential nexus and the rough proportionality test. Nolan created the essential nexus and Dolan created the rough proportionality test. So the nexus means that the exaction must have a rational connection or nexus to the burden that the government seeks to avoid. In other words, a legitimate public problem that is arising from this development. What is going to be the public problem or hardship may be created by this additional new development. As for the rough proportionality test, the exaction must be roughly proportionate both in nature and extent to the impact caused by the development. So courts have held that the proportionate in nature means that the exaction meets a need caused by the development. Need or impact is seen as a problem, the courts have looked at. Exaction is the solution. So here, and I'll focus kind of on the pedestrian, with this pedestrian connection through this community, or whether it's by easement for future connection, tying into this Grove subdivision, what is the need that is being created by this new development that doesn't already exist? How is the development of these essentially 9 lots that would tie in here, creating a need for a connection of pedestrian walking trails? Staff is stating that there is a desire to promote walkability and use of bicycles as opposed to vehicles. Staff is making, in our position, a conclusory decision that it's needed as a result of this development, that also we need these walking trails right here because of these 9 lots being built. On the rough proportionality test, and I'm going to go to the Dolan case, and it's got some similar components to this one. So in Dolan, a property owner owned several hardware chains and wanted to open a new store in Tigard, Oregon. The store ran alongside of a creek, and the city required an easement along the side of the creek for flood control. The city wanted to promote bicycling, so it predicated its approval of this development plan, this expanded storefront, on the requirement that the front of the property was also to be used as a public bike trail, a path. It was a greenway, and they wanted to expand it into this person's property to expand this bike path. The U.S. Supreme Court agreed that flood control and traffic safety were legitimate public interest, and so the easement and bike test met the first portion of the Nelson test, the essential nexus. However, the court determined that the exaction for a bike path was not roughly proportional to the impact or burden placed on the city resulting from the development. So didn't meet the second step of this roughly proportional standard because this development didn't create such a traffic increase or demand or need to justify taking additional property along their frontage to create a bike path. So that kind of the analysis that we would apply here is that these few lots does not, even if it meets the essential nexus, it's not roughly proportional to either carve in a path, pedestrian connection, trailways, or an easement for future connectivity here. When you have, I guess, no substantial increased demand as a result of the development, but also there are alternative paths around the area with the other developments and improvements along Virtue Road there that'll be happening in the future. I've talked with Mr. Hale. We just had a chance to talk briefly before the meeting, and again, purpose of the discussion is he and I wanted to kind of, I think, get together and explore and discuss over the next few weeks as well, kind of his thoughts on this. It's confusing, and it's easy to conceptually get at least for me, but then when I try to apply it, it can become convoluted. So he and I are going to kind of work through it, but I can answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, I've got a statement.
Or try to.
You are aware that there's going to be a new school built?
I'm not.
Okay. If this subdivision is built, right now, there's not a way for these students that may be living here to walk a sidewalk or a walking trail to the school. There's not one on Virtue Road, and there's really not one on Evans Road. But there will be one in the Grove. And so to me, a way to walk to the Grove walking trail and to the school would be an important item. I mean, that, to me, I don't know about the rest of the
That's a very good point.
Planning Commission, but it's something that, as a young person, I walk to school. I walk 2.5 miles to school every day and back home. And I had a good path to go. Not everybody does, but this would be a good path to go for any student that lived in that subdivision. I don't think it would be a cut through, because where are you cutting through from or to? Unless you live in that subdivision and you're going to the school, then you would use that path right there. I don't think anybody else would use it or even know it was there. But that's just my point of view, okay?
And that's kind of what the Dolan Court looked at in reaching its decision was, the city said that this could increase the demand and need for a bicycle path, and they said that's where it fell short. There was no certainty that there was going to be this increased demand. Therefore, taking somebody's property without compensation, on a possibility or could be, wasn't the absolute to meet the roughly proportionate standard.
So we're going to sell lots to people that don't have kids? Is that the plan?
Well, and I agree with your point. That's a discussion I think that we really need to work through, because it is, I've read the law and, like you said, and I'm not an attorney, so I'm like, okay, I got stuck halfway through, and I appreciate that you've divided it out into two different issues of the nexus of essential government interest, something along those lines, and then the proportionality, rough proportionality test. But there is a school coming in off McPhee Road, on the other side of McPhee Road, with the design of Grove at Boyd Station. That would be, especially for school kids, because that's the struggle with a lot of school kids, is walking on these main roads. They get a little crazy, and you can come through a neighborhood. It would.
This school will not have buses, by the way.
Well, we'll have buses. No? They're going to try and do everything in the parental, 1,200 kids in the parental responsibility
That's what they're
zone.
saying right now.
Well, that explains how I was worried about how the buses are going to get under the railroad tracks. Well, now I know.
That side, they're not going to, they've already indicated that side they weren't going to zone for, it's just going to be parental responsibility zone, but I thought they would reach a lot further
I
into.
was saying the south side, those kids
Farragut.
are still going to go to Farragut?
No, the south side goes to North Shore.
To North Shore, okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I guess if we had to try to prioritize, this is really important to us, because we see this development as being, we've been here 32 years, you all know that. And we see this as being something that's important to be a self-contained. There's plenty of sidewalk on Evans, plenty of sidewalk. When Virtue gets expanded in the near future, there's going to be plenty of sidewalk there. That's going to connect all the way to McPhee when that goes all the way around. There's going to be plenty of sidewalk there. It just doesn't feel right to have 9 lots and have a cut through and a sidewalk, walking trail, jogging trail, whatever, right down the side of one of the lots. Right beside, you're going to basically have lots, and you're going to have a sidewalk come right between houses. And I don't think we have a lot of that in the town. Usually they're on the front or on the back of the lots that I've seen.
We have it all over Fox Run.
We have dozens of walking
Trails in
trails.
between lots
in
and
between
and-
houses,
yeah.
yeah.
Pretty common.
That's
Yeah,
very
that's
common,
very
actually, in
Well,
town.
that's
Yeah.
an important issue, because to us, we're trying to do this in a way that it would be self-contained. It doesn't, I understand what you're saying, and I think if you have to say in Farragut are people walking to school, I don't think so. So in Farragut, I don't see that. I'm out in the morning too. I don't see kids walking to school. But I'm gonna let Mr. Hill talk.
Just want to make a couple of points. Nolan and Dolan.
Tom, tell us who you are.
Oh, I'm
TV.
TV. Tom Hale, 12007 Mallard Bay Drive. The cases of Nolan and Dolan have been in existence for almost 20 years now, for a long time. We have actually been following Nolan and Dolan in a lot of our projects that we have done. If you think about Everett Road, the whole reason we adopted the ordinance that allocated the cost of Everett Road among all the property owners in that corridor was because it was required by Nolan and Dolan. We didn't wait on the Tennessee legislature to start complying with federal law because we already had a Supreme Court case in Tennessee saying that Tennessee courts should follow the law of the federal takings law, which is what Nolan and Dolan is. All we're talking about here is not whether or not we can require this walkway. The question is, do we have to pay for it? The town has the authority to put a sidewalk through this area if that's what the town decides to do. The issue here is, do we have the power under Nolan and Dolan to require it be dedicated as part of the platting process? And that is not an easy assessment to make. It was easy to figure out Everett Road because we were improving the entirety of Everett Road beyond the boundaries or where the land was that was being developed that first caused the need for that improvement. That was, well, I say it was easy. David Smoke and I worked on the formula. It wasn't that easy. But it was done in accordance with the law. And same thing on Virtue Road when we did Brookmere. We have the same kind of calculation that attempts to determine what the cost is and allocate that cost among all the potential developments that would go along that road. So how Nolan and Dolan apply to a walkway like we're talking about here is something that I'm in the process of studying right now. And you all understand this, but I'll say it anyway. Every circumstance, every situation that you're called on to look at, they all have a different set of facts. And every court case has a different set of facts. You cannot assess how the law applies until you know what all the facts are. And so that's what I'm trying to do right now with this particular, I'm now first learning tonight of what exactly the issue is. There probably have been some court decisions since Nolan and Dolan that dealt with the very issue that we're talking about. We just hadn't had a chance to run down all the cases to determine whether or not there is one that is similar to this situation. We're going to give you the advice that we believe would be required to comply with Nolan and Dolan whenever we know exactly what the request is, and we're starting to kind of understand it. Nolan and Dolan applies to a lot of different things. Mainly, you would think it have to do with off-site road improvements. That's where most of the exaction litigation is an off-site road improvements. I have a pretty serious question in my mind as to whether or not, if you're requiring a contribution of land on the front of a subdivision that fronts on a road and you don't go beyond the boundaries of that tract of land that's being developed, why is that not roughly proportional to the rest of the improvement of that road? If you're only going to the boundary, you follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, there's an answer to that, but I don't have enough hours in the day to read every decision that comes out on this subject because there's a lot of them that come out. So we're going to be looking at that. But my main point that I want to make to you all is don't think we hadn't been following Nolan and Dolan, and don't think we've waited until the legislature adopted this law last year to start complying with it, because it was the law of the land before that. And we've been following it for a number of years. So if you have any questions about it, I have not read Nolan and Dolan in the last 3 or 4 years. Obviously, Taylor has. I'm not going to try to tell you what they say exactly, but I think generally his description of what the court said was completely accurate. The issue is, were the facts presented in that case similar enough to what we're talking about here to know how that applies? And I don't purport to know the answer to that tonight, but we'll figure it out and let you know once we have. Anybody have any questions?
I think it goes back to a fundamental question for us in the town. Is there a compelling reason for it? And it gets, there's pros and cons, and so it comes down to how do we view it, and how compelling is it to me in this application? Because like you say, each case is kind of slightly different.
It certainly
And
is.
it's got to be looked at in the merits of what we're looking at here, not as some general concept that applies as some hard rule everywhere is a rubber stamp.
I think I heard you say earlier that you do not plan to have a sidewalk within the development, period. I have a problem with that because I think it's a bad idea and it's not consistent with any of our plans in the town. Do you really have a problem with putting a sidewalk within the development out to, say, Evans Road? For access for your residents and kids and anybody else to get out to there and access other sidewalks that may exist and will exist eventually out that way?
Out on Evans, yeah. I kind of do, I was going by what you've been doing on these big lot subdivisions, the state size lot subdivisions. And I don't believe they're putting in the sidewalks on the 20-foot road. So I was basically going by that. I think that's, with a 20-foot road, when I first started talking to Mark about this, I was talking about a 16-foot. Then I think the town had started requesting 20-foot from other people doing estate lots. So I said, well, okay, 20-foot, we could do that with the curbs, the swales, not curbs, no curbs, swales. So the sidewalk would be up in the yard. You'd have to put it quite a ways away up in the yard. And two, by asking for not having the connection, it didn't make any sense to do that because it's just a small 1 street, 9 lots, and they're bigger size lots. That was my rationale. I'm just trying to do something that's very unique, that matches what you've been doing in the other estate size lot developments.
But we have been requiring trail connections in some of these other state-sized lots. I mean, yours is very similar to the one on Old Stage. What's that one called? Didn't we require a connection through that one to Old Stage?
Which one you
What's the
talking
ones?
about?
Bob
it's on
Watts
Old-
Farm?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he has a sidewalk and a walking
They're
trail.
small lots, but you could do the Union Road.
Yeah, that's
connections
fewer
there
lots
for
than
13.
this.
Yeah, they're tiny. I wouldn't agree with that because those are tiny lots. These are
You're right, you're
big
right.
lots.
I misspoke.
Well, a comparable subdivision would be Sassafras
Yeah,
Meadows.
Sassafras.
Actually, his is, like I've said a couple of times, there's twice as many lots in this as there is in those other recent rural subdivisions that we've had. Tucker's actually was over 5 acres. And he platted some pedestrian facility easements with that. didn't have to build them at this time, but he's set it up to provide for, if it made sense in the future, that you'd have an easement there. And plus, whoever buys that lot knows that there could be, maybe never, but there could be a walking trail or a sidewalk or something that would tie into Rockwell Farm over time. Because we got to think about, again, the future. What's this area going to look like in 20 years, and try to think ahead and provide for at least the opportunity to do certain things that would be consistent with our plan. And our plan talks a whole lot about connectivity.
Yes.
We talk about it on
Yeah.
everything that we review.
Yep.
Yeah. But
and-
I
and-
see that as a goal, not an absolute, and a blind, with blinders on.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
these variances
number one.
that
Number
we-
two, I personally see no compelling reason to have that walking trail there in this one. That's my position. But I do have a question about the sidewalks, because the culpability back to health and safety, it's not a matter of connectivity, it's health and safety of folks walking in the street. And we do have a responsibility to carry out, a
Walking in the
charter
street.
relative to health and safety implementation, and the culpability if we approve something, lo and behold, somebody gets hit because there wasn't a sidewalk there, or something like that. I see a other string to pull. It's not a matter of being able to walk and connect, it's a matter of health and safety.
I agree. You talk walking with your dog or you're walking with your children, it's nice to be on a sidewalk.
Yeah.
So your children know where they're supposed to be, not walking along the side of the road. So
We don't
I
have
agree with
sidewalks,
that.
and we
For a
have-
person that
it's
lives
real
in
problem
a
with people.
subdivision with no sidewalks, I mean, when you've got lawn people coming through, I mean, contractors, whatever, doing painting or whatever, I mean, as families are walking down the street, they're jumping into neighbors' yards and pulling their dog with them because of a car coming by.
Especially
It's
with
dangerous.
a 20-foot wide
That's a
street.
26-foot wide
We
street
face that
there.
every day
Yeah,
in our
20, yeah.
subdivision.
Me too.
So I'm all for the sidewalk myself.
Yeah, if you're going to depend on the Evans Road and the Virtue Road sidewalks to carry your people,
Yep.
then I think you should have a sidewalk that would go out to it that is generated in your development.
It's fair enough.
And it sends a signal of how to direct, they see a sidewalk there, they want to try and use it. It kind of helps direct the foot traffic.
And you know the
On any other.
the topo better than anybody.
Yes.
And so when you go to design swales, you could design accordingly. I think that would be a way I would look at it.
Any other feedback on anything right now? I think the private street thing, I don't think that's go anywhere.
I'm not sure we've given him direction on the walking trail connection or whatever.
Well, it sounds like, from
I've
what
just
I'm
given my
hearing,
opinion,
that
I don't know that
the
that
sidewalk on
represents
the,
anybody else's view.
sidewalk on the Spine Road would serve the purpose of a safe access to a sidewalk outside of their neighborhood.
Yep.
If you're not gonna have a trail, well, you still end up having to walk in the street to get to the
That's a
trail.
900-foot long road.
But at the end of the day, it's only 9 houses.
Yeah.
So if there was a connection, Steve, I could see a connection going from the cul-de-sac down through kind of the little, it's not really a creek, but the little drainage area parallel to your driveway and coming out on Virtue Road, and then, maybe eliminating the sidewalk that you have going out to Evans Road. Because if I was in that neighborhood, I think I'd want to go over to Turkey Creek. I could get over to Anchor Park. We're going to have a new connection that's going to go all the way out, basically all the way to Kingston Pike. And if somebody did want to go down to the school, they could go, especially a kid on a bicycle. Once the pedestrian facilities are built along Virtue and Boyd Station, that's a lot flatter ground than trying to go up and over that steep hill. That would be, connecting over to the Grove at, what do we call it, the Grove at Boyd Station? And so I think if there was a good candidate for a connection, I think it to me, it kind of goes from that cul-de-sac down the little drainage way, kind of following through there. That's relatively flat through there. And I think with a connection like that, I could probably, and I speak for myself, I think I could support the elimination of the easement going over to the Grove, because it is really steep, and I can't, as much as I'd like to think that kids would use it, I mean, it's a tough hill. They're definitely not going to use it on a bicycle.
No, you
And then,
think? Really?
and being that you only have 9,
They will.
then only, yeah, I mean, they may try to skateboard down it, but and then being that you have 9 lots, I think that's a pretty rational reason of saying, okay, there's just 9 lots. There's not a lot of traffic. Obviously, when you have houses under construction, you're going to have a fair amount of traffic, but once all that settles out, I think, that would be a good basis to eliminate the sidewalk out to Evans. But
I don't
to
agree
be able
with
to say,
that.
hey, you don't need any connections whatsoever, I'm going to have a really tough time. I mean, I've been a big vocal supporter of this connectivity, and to me, the path of least resistance is going from the cul-de-sac kind of north and east straight to the intersection of Turkey Creek and Virtue Road, or somewhere where it's appropriate, but generally having a connection there.
It'd probably
So-
be viewed as an
So what-
amenities.
So what you would be asking us to do is put a 20-foot easement in for a future walking trail?
I mean, that's simple enough that, it could be done while you're paving your streets, but I could acquiesce to either. I don't want to preclude the ability to ever have any kind of connectivity, because to me, your topography there is pretty easy. I mean, for East Tennessee standards.
Well, it wouldn't make any sense to try to do something now because Virtue is
That's
not-
true.
Not at the grade it's
Well, no,
gonna be
and we don't want to spill anybody out, especially pedestrians, onto Virtue Road right now.
Right.
Virtue Road is a
if
scary
you
road
put-
if you're a
So-
pedestrian or a bicyclist.
So if you're looking at the plat, what you're saying, put a 20-foot easement in for a future walking trail between 9 and 10 along the
Mark, you
side.
want to highlight that again and see if, and again, I speak for myself, I don't speak for anybody else, but, there might be some middle ground here, and maybe that's a logical way to be able to have some pedestrian connectivity.
I think he's talking about 9 and 10 where your existing
Yeah, no, I think you're
existing
right.
driveway is.
Yeah, well, not where the
Next to it,
existing, but, kind of close. I mean, maybe
Right
it's
by the
parallel. It's kind of, maybe when it gets down close to Virtue Road, it's parallel to your driveway. Obviously, with this level of detail, I don't know exactly topographically what's going on, but to me, that's going to be, for kids in the neighborhood, once Virtue Road and Boyd Station is improved, that's going to be an easier, even though it's not as straight as the crow flies, it's going to be an easier way to get to the school, and it's going to give folks the opportunity to ultimately get over to Anchor Park. There's still some connections that will have to be done along Turkey Creek, which the Board of Mayor and Aldermen are working on. But to me, that might be a solution, is what's highlighted in red.
So plat okay, Mark.
Well, I'm not telling you what's going to be approved. I'm just telling you what my idea is.
And I disagree with that. I think you need that connection to Evans Road, because once you get to Evans Road, then you have connections down through to
Either way.
Turkey Creek Highway.
You can go both, yeah,
Eventually, you'll
either
have walking connections over to McPhee.
We already have.
I just think that's a better solution, and you have a way to walk in the neighborhood along the sidewalk, so.
And it's narrow.
You
because
have,
it's
you have the connection
I think
to
there's
Evans
3
Road.
of us here that agree with that.
My issue is that it's a 20-foot wide street, and that is pretty narrow. It's just narrow. And I understand that it's 9 lots, so
Yeah.
you're.
I think we're saying sidewalk.
And it's not a cut through or there's no connectivity to the street, it's a cul-de-sac.
I understand that. But I'm looking at the distance of both of them thinking, okay, it's like 6 of one, a half dozen of the other when it comes to the distance. I don't know.
Long term, I think the sidewalks are the way to go. Your residents down the road are going to appreciate it. Believe me. I miss those sidewalks. If there was any way to change it, I would, but I can't.
You keep referring to it as a cut through, and I just don't see it as a cut through because there's nothing to cut through from.
This is what the cut through.
You know, I mean, that traffic from Evans Road, there's just really, what would be the cut through?
Oh,
Who
I was referring to if you put a walking trail up to the Grove.
Grove, and that's what I'm saying, though, there's.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I was answering the question.
No, I was just trying to see it, if it is coming from the backside, not to the cul-de-sac, but where it's drawn out on
Well, if
here.
you have sidewalk, that's.
It wouldn't be
It is the
necessarily
only
a
thing
cut
used
through
by
into
people
the
in
Grove.
neighborhood, really.
It would be into the Grove, but not from the Grove there, because where would the destination be?
Well, if you
What would
put
be
that
generating any cut-through traffic?
If you put that red line in, I think there's a cut-through.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then they're cutting through you to get over to Turkey Creek.
Yeah.
They're cutting the
That's,
corner
then it
off.
becomes a cut-through, if you put that red line in there. Not so much,
I mean, I'm just curious, but who would be cutting through there?
That's my
Oh,
question.
people from,
I mean, people in here
coming
going
from-
that way.
Just the 9 lots that live in there would be the only
They're
ones.
gonna come here
I
and then
can't think
go
of
down
anybody
to
else that
them.
would use it.
That's my
I mean, I'm
feeling as
fine with
well.
either
Come
one,
over
the
the
blue
hill.
or the red one. Steve, I think we're, as you can see, kind of the flavor of where this is going. We'd like to see some pedestrian, either easements
There's
or
one or the
facilities
other.
as part of this plan.
Could we look at a easement without the easement toward the grove?
Period.
Go ahead, Mayor.
I think really the blue line is really what makes sense. You know, it makes more sense really than the, going to the Grove.
Right here.
Absolutely.
Because your people in your neighborhood will be able to walk out to the sidewalk.
For the Grove.
Yes, there will be future sidewalks up Evans, there'll be future walks on Virtue, but either way, if they come out right there, they can go right or left.
Okay,
So
so what we're saying is, we would omit the talk of going to the Grove, we would look at the blue or the red, and you
Oh,
all.
no. The
I think
blue
we
is a given to me.
Okay.
Because it's a health and safety issue. It's not a connectivity issue.
yeah.
I think it's right.
And I think, we have to carry out, our responsibility to look at the health and safety aspect in that respect.
Okay.
yeah, I agree.
I think what Steve's asking us is this easement, I guess that would be between Lot 6 and Lot 7, that would go up
That's
to the
totally
Grove.
out in
Are
my
we
opinion.
okay
Okay,
with?
that's what I'm trying to
Are we
explain.
okay with eliminating the requirement for that easement?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And this is
Okay.
Steve, and then there's
I
another one here.
asked
He's
the
got
question
four
in a way,
parcels altogether.
wasn't understandable then.
Well, I was getting where you were going, but you need some direction so you can do some design.
Right, okay, and you're saying if we did the blue or the red, the blue may be the preference, but.
Blue is
The blue is.
Okay.
a must.
I need that clarification. Okay, the blue's the preference, and it's either a sidewalk or an easement for the sidewalk.
No.
And that's on the.
Blue is a fact, a sidewalk,
A
period.
sidewalk, okay.
No easement, no thought,
That's what you're
other than that, it's a sidewalk,
Will all
period.
that fit in a 40-foot right-of-way? Can you get that to fit, you think, with
it's
a
got
sidewalk, 20 feet of asphalt? Yeah, I mean, I guess it should.
Yeah.
Mathematically, it
Curb-
fits.
There's no curb and gutter.
Yeah, no curb and gutter, so,
Depends on the slope.
you know, that's what I said earlier, you know the topo better than anybody as far as how to design the swales.
Yeah, I've got my drawings. Okay, I've done that.
Good.
Okay, we'll go back and ponder that. I think the private road is something y'all have heartburn over.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a non-starter.
You read
I'm
that
going to
one?
be a lone wolf on this one, and that's okay. I advocated for private roads 20 years ago, and I can't go back on what I advocated for there. So I'm probably the only one that would support that. But again, you can kind of see where everybody else stands. But if you went back 20 years ago, you'll find me on record exactly where Steve's standing, advocating for private roads. So I'm not going to go back on what I supported 20 years ago.
I remember where we had to accept the private road as, in the town. and
Okay,
what
Mark,
that
do we
meant
have
too.
enough for us to,
If you do, yeah. So to be clear, no action on the concept plan. I want that to be clear. He's asked for no action on that, so.
but we have enough for you and I to work forward?
I think I have enough guidance from them on that. I mean, is the blue thing.
We probably, being that was a advertised part of the agenda,
Yeah.
we probably actually need to have a vote on that particular action item, whether it's withdrawn from
Yeah.
by the applicant, or it's postponed by the applicant or by the planning commission. But we probably are required to do some sort of action, since we did
Yeah.
publicly notify it as an action item.
We've done that.
We
to
go there,
others.
let's go over A through H, to make sure that we're all clear about what we're talking about.
Amen.
And then then Mr. Williams has clarity.
Detention basin is A.
And that's using the kind of the beat the peak concept. Is that the rationale of because of the lake?
Yeah.
And the next 20 feet.
Size of
A is
lot.
o- A is okay.
With swales, we should be good there.
Yeah, the soils are fine, the private road not fine.
Yeah, but private road with gated entry,
Private road,
that sounds like
yes,
that's
on the
gonna be a
other.
deal killer.
Cul-de-sac length is
Fine.
fine.
Cul-de-sac's fine with the sidewalk,
20-foot
vehicular
wide road is fine.
connections. Okay, no vehicular
with the
connections.
sidewalk.
No gated.
No vehicular connection, but do provide for sidewalk.
It's E.
10%, I think we're okay with
Fine.
that.
Yeah.
With that,
The
Good.
width, the depth, we talked
Okay.
about
And
that.
yep.
And then the road improvements to Virtue and Evans.
Yeah.
And that's one that goes right back to those tests that
Yeah.
you were talking about, and
Yeah.
that's why we said we wouldn't feel that this is proportionate to improving those roads to the complete street cross-section. It just wouldn't be proportionate. So, again, like Tom said, we've been trying to follow Nolan and Dolan with everything that comes before us. We want to make sure that what somebody's requesting is, what we're asking them to do is proportionate to what they're requesting, so.
You clear, Steve?
I think I'm clear, we're not going up the hill with a sidewalk
Not
or
going
an
up the hill.
easement. We're talking about a sidewalk, and we're not doing a private road unless I can get more than one vote.
Well, you'll need at least five votes for that. And it doesn't sound like you're gonna get it.
You never know, as we go into the holiday season, some of the folks here may start getting a weaker heart and start thinking more about, what our desires
We've
are.
already given.
Have you watched us lately?
I have.
Okay.
Look at the number of yeses you got.
Yeah, Steve, quite frankly, when I saw this list of all the variances, I think you got a lot more tonight
Yeah,
than
I
I
think
was
you got it
expecting
all.
you to get, so.
Merry Christmas.
Okay.
Okay, we're moving on to item number 12.
Nope,
Oh, no,
we're not.
we gotta vote.
Gotta vote.
What are we voting
Voted
on?
to postpone?
It would be
drawing or
easier if the
postpone?
applicant initiated this instead of leaving it on us to do it. So Steve, if we vote on this, it may put you in a dilemma you don't want to be on as it's presented. So as the applicant, you may want to ask your attorney about how,
What's your
we've
request?
got to vote on something, some action item tonight. And I can't give you a
postpone it.
recommendation, but
You could postpone.
Yeah, I'd like to ask for a motion to postpone.
Do we have to put a time to it until, I don't have to put a time to it, just postpone. Okay.
requirement, Tom Hale's shaking his head no. I'm going to make a motion to postpone at the applicant's request.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
12, I tried. Discussion on an update to the Farragut sign ordinance, Town of Farragut applicant. This is for discussion only.
And Bart, you're up.
Yeah, I'll turn this over to Bart. I would say just from my perspective, I appreciate Bart and Holly going through our sign ordinance and making some updates based on
Yeah.
their application of our ordinance that we updated a few years ago, so, and he can go through the specifics with you.
I thought he'd put that on the agenda just so we could see Bart.
All right, Bart, Mike's all yours.
I'm Bart Hose, I'm the Assistant Community Development Director. And we've been looking at some potential amendments to the sign ordinance. We've been working with the VRB on that. That's the Visual Resources Review Board. The existing ordinance was adopted back in spring of 2020, so it's been in place for
Hold
about
on, gentlemen, if y'all wouldn't mind taking your conversation outside, we're going to get through our meeting tonight.
David.
All right,
Y'all go out the hall.
Go outside.
blame it on Smoke, it's his fault. Well, y'all doing the rotunda.
We're trying to hear it.
Okay, so the new ordinance has been in place for approximately 2.5 years. So we've been working with it that whole time. We've had a lot of applications for signs. So over the course of that 2.5 years, we've seen some areas that need to either be clarified or improved for enforcement purposes. And then we've also seen some need where the original ordinance wasn't really quite meeting the need out there for some types of signage. So we've gone through it again. We've worked with the BRB on it and proposing several amendments to them. They tend to be kind of repetitive because the ordinance is repetitive. There's things that are allowed in different sections. So the amendments had to be made in multiple sections of the ordinance, or at least the proposed amendments would need to be done that way. Really, the main ones, I think, from the standpoint of new signage or additional signage that would be permitted, are there in the bullet points on the write-up. We're reintroducing a sign type that is called a general occupant sign. That used to be in the old ordinance. It was taken out of the current one because we now allow for more window signage, but we found that, there are still applicants that would like what we would define as a general occupant sign. And that's, buildings where they might want to put a small plaque on the side of the building. They may want to have, hours listed on that instead of on the window or on the door, or just, list tenants, maybe a doctor's office or something like that. So, we would make provision for that. There's also a proposed change to what we deem a peripheral accessory sign. Those are small signs that are out there along the street. Right now, the ordinance only allows for one, and we found that a lot of business owners want to have enter exit, and one doesn't get enter exit done. It only gets exit or enter. So, that's another provision that we're putting in, or we're proposing to put in, providing for both those types of signs at HOA properties. So, currently they're not allowed at all for, like a pool house or a clubhouse in an HOA. And we thought that, again, there's plenty of those that would probably want that type of signage. And then also adding in non-residential construction signs. So we allow for construction signs to be out when someone's building a subdivision, but we really didn't have any provision for if someone's building a bank or building a commercial business. So, all of those things are being proposed to be added back in. The VRB's looked at all this and have recommended it on to you all to start looking at. Ultimately, it'll have to be put in ordinance form and run through here, and then also run to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to be adopted. Some other potential amendments were brought up at the last meeting from in regard to athletic field signage, but the VRB felt that that was a bigger topic, and they didn't want to delay getting this onto the Planning Commission to start getting input on what you think about these proposed amendments.
It may need to be workshopped.
Yeah, and so what I did is I put together the proposed language in the context of the larger ordinance. I think you had that in your packet. The proposed language is in blue. And then we put explanations of what we were trying to accomplish or why we were trying to accomplish it in green. I'm not proposing that we go through all that, line by line. Do y'all have any questions on any of those, or?
I appreciated how you did this, Bart, because you've made the changes, and then and I didn't have to keep flipping back and forth. And I'm reading. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, actually, Holly had done something like that for some other regulations we were working on, and it seemed to make good sense, so we went ahead and did it in this one as well, so.
Makes it easy to compare.
Thank you, Bart.
Your willingness to go through this, because that's, I know the first time you went through that sign, you served on that.
This gave me heartburn just looking at it.
Thank God. It's
Bring back
tough.
nightmares.
This is tough stuff, yeah. So thank you for
And-
doing that.
And some of it is just clarifying language to make it clearer for both the applicant and the enforcers. And then also, if we do end up in an appeal situation or in court, hopefully it'll be clearer, so it's more easily defended in that context.
It's always hard to write a lot of reasons for this.
So this is just for discussion. Will this come back
Yeah.
for a recommendation to go to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen?
Yeah. It'll be like any other ordinance for, amending another ordinance. Probably since, the amount of amendment here, we'll probably just delete the existing ordinance in its entirety and replace it with this new
Okay.
language, because it's just easier to do that way than, having an ordinance with so many sections, this section amending that section.
Yeah.
And also,
Yeah, it's confusing to
makes
people that's trying to look stuff up.
sort of wipe it clean and just put
Yeah.
a new one in place.
Good point.
Awesome. Thank you, Bart.
So when would we review that again and have it for vote? I mean, do we have a time period where we get to really try to digest it and shoot holes in it and make comments on it, or is it just going to be presented to the Planning Commission?
Well, he's asking right now,
Yeah.
your thoughts, I mean.
Yeah, he's looking for feedback.
Yeah.
Feedback on
Do you
any
have
changes or
additional feedback
wordsmithing.
on it, or?
It's a lot to go through, and I'll be honest, I do like the format, but I'll be honest, I haven't gone through all of these to digest them, to be honest.
I did,
If
and
you wanna-
I'm very happy with them.
Okay.
I did
Well-
as well.
I like the format.
If you have
I think
something
it's-
you come across, just send it to me or Bart or both
Okay, I
of us.
can, and then
Yeah, that's fine.
until, we got a month really anyway to look at it. Thank you.
Okay.
So we're looking at this for next month.
It depends on whether you can get it ready by then. I don't want to speak for Bart, but
January would be fine. And if you want to deal with it in December or wait until
December.
January.
When I look at what
depending on-
December agenda looks
It
like,
looks oppressive.
it doesn't look
I
good.
think January will
It's
look
gonna be
good
a
for
big
Bart.
I'll tell
Do
you
over
that.
Thanksgiving,
January,
Bart.
Bart.
It's not going to be a short one.
Okay,
All right.
Mark, you do it based on what your load is, okay? I think that's probably a better way to.
Yeah, that's fine.
let's see, any utilities? No utilities, any public comments?
Yes, I do. I have one. John Holztrager. You're it, John.
So,
John Holstrager, 345 Bernie Baldwin Park. Appreciate and agreed with your vote on the whole Hy-Vee mess tonight. Thank you for not allowing that to drag out. Ms. Holliday, I liked your suggestion on the raising hands. I don't know if we've practiced that in the past, but to reduce delay, I really like that. Another thank you. MPC has been diligent to post agendas in advance and stick to the agenda. I think that's been great. That helps citizens rearrange their personal schedules, get a dog sitter, get a kid sitter, whatever they need to do so they can be here. So thank you for that. Here's my point. I don't know if this is a dumb idea or if I'll hit a nerve with this, but you're organized, you plan well. Citizens have to do some planning to get here too. But it feels sometimes like some companies come here and intentionally delay, and I want to assume innocence. I know when you're running a big project, that things can happen that are outside of your control. But it seems like we have lots of delays, and you have experienced them more than I have. I've only been doing this for 6 or 7 years. So I guess I just want to say citizens would welcome any kind of a process change that would help eliminate or reduce the delays that we see in this process, because it's really frustrating when we organize a bunch of citizens to come in and provide input on whatever the topic is, only to have somebody like Hy-Vee, attempt to make a delay, and maybe it was intentional, maybe it wasn't. I'm not accusing them of anything. It's just a little frustrating because citizens came prepared, and then we weren't called upon, which was fine because your vote prevented that. That's my comment. I'll shut up. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
in that case,
Good.
no other comments. The November 17th meeting, 2022 is adjourned.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.